Or do you think this?
That if it was actually something very feasible that the Titans had cap space for, then yes, 100%, because I know we talk about how the Titans are such a run-first offense, but it doesn't necessarily need to be that way. So, of course, adding some offensive depth would help, and Julio Jones seems like the person to do that. But whenever you have to jump through hoops in terms of reorganizing contracts and trying to find money in the cap wherever that money may or may not exist, it just seems like a lot of work for a guy who may be past his prime in an offense that, to be frank, it is a very run-first offense and a team that doesn't yet have a tight end. So I understand that the Titans need more pass catchers available. But they also need a tight end.
They need a tight end. I mean, again, run-first team doesn't have a starting tight end. That is an issue. That's what's got to get fixed before you can sit there and talk to me about Julio Jones. And not only that, I do think there could be a dumb team in the Julio sweepstakes. And a dumb team screws up the market for everybody. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. If you want to get started, 615-737-1025. I, again, am thinking tight end, and I know I'm in the minority when I do this. I mean, we played around with contracts today because Twitter got all mad at me. And
I love when Twitter gets mad at you.
Oh, they got mad.
It's so fun.
So this is a true story, and I'll break this down around 4 o'clock today about how ridiculous the wannabe football analysts that don't even have a blue check mark on Twitter are. But
I don't have a blue check mark. Don't gate check blue check marks.
I said wannabe analysts that don't have a blue check mark. I didn't say you were a wannabe analyst. But yeah. I'm just saying that some people just, try to play a role that maybe they're not actually prepared for.
Okay.
But I just said that it's not feasible to redo Tannehill's contract and then all of a sudden take in Julio Jones.
Yes.
I went out to the lake. Like, I tweeted that, went out to the lake. Didn't think anything of it. I was out on Tim's Ford where there's not great cell service. I get back, and my phone just explodes with all these people being like, "You're so dumb. You don't know what you're talking about." We went over it today before the show. How unrealistic is it to just redo Tannehill's contract to pick up Julio Jones?
It sounds so easy. Yeah, let's just, redo Tannehill's contract. But when you look at the astronomical amount of money that the Titans would owe Ryan Tannehill, a guy who is also getting out of his prime, it just doesn't make any sense. It's almost like you would be putting the Titans in a worse position by doing that.
615-737-1025 is our number. We do have an update, though, on what's next in the Julio sweepstakes. We will get to that. Stillman Company, we are live from the wholesaling studio, powered by RumbleOn.com. It's ESPN 1025 The Game, and we're streaming in the Game Nashville app. June 1st, which means NFL action will be starting very soon in free agency part 2. Again, I started this with the show. June 1st is important because, again, you can spread a cap hit out over 2 years. June 1st next year is literally going to be like a second free agency because the expectation is that the cap will go up in 2023. So you'll see a lot of teams this time next year offloading guys with the hopes of spreading out cap hits into 2023 when the cap explodes and everything goes back to normal, which is good. But right now, the Titans have roughly $3 million in cap space. They have 3 rookies that are unsigned. The expectation, I have been told, is that those rookies will get signed underneath that $3 million in cap space, but that certainly would eat a little bit into it. The Titans don't have a number 1 tight end. They don't have a number 1 kicker. They have no depth at outside linebacker unless you want to count Rashad Weaver, and I don't even know how to feel about that. And they really don't have an answer at slot wide receiver unless you want to count Des Fitzpatrick, and I don't really know how people feel about that. So a lot to get done this month. And let's not rule out the idea of the Titans cutting somebody and using the June 1st savings in order to spread it out over a 2-year window. But we give the people what they want.
We try to.
They want Julio info. So we have the latest on the Julio Jones sweepstakes. Dan Graziano this morning on ESPN laid out what the latest surrounding Julio Jones is. Here's what he said.
Dan Graziano, Julio Jones.
Yeah.
How soon should we be expecting a move?
I think it could be pretty soon, right? We have to wait till after June 1st in order for them to get the salary cap relief they need. So after close of business today. So theoretically, it could be tonight, tomorrow. I think at some point this week, it's possible Julio Jones could be on the move. Now, it's been a tricky situation to report because you hear a lot of different teams and you hear a lot of different moving parts. They're asking for a first-round pick and for whoever takes him on to take on the whole $15.3 million salary. The odds of them getting both of those things, I think, are slim. So maybe they come down to a second-round pick. Maybe they pick up part of the salary, although I don't think they can do much. And in terms of teams, you hear a lot of teams. The 2 most consistent I've heard have been the Rams and Patriots, a little bit of Tennessee, and then you hear there are other teams like Seattle, San Francisco that I think kind of feel like they wish they could do it, but in the end they probably can't get there in terms of what it'll take. So we could have some answers on this pretty soon.
So he's saying pretty soon, here comes the Julio answer, and that Atlanta and this goes back, how many times have we talked about it? Atlanta wants something good, and they want you to take the money.
Of course they do.
We don't think that's going to happen. But he brought up the Rams and the Patriots are the 2 teams he's hearing. And then he said, and a little Tennessee. So now what we have is the reporting of Graziano, who says a little bit of Tennessee, and the reporting from last week, Diana Rossini saying from ESPN that the Titans have kicked the tires on Julio. She thinks it would be a long shot for them to acquire Julio Jones, and that Atlanta already has a first-round pick on the table offered from somebody. Okay.
Reportedly.
So the way I look at it is let's take all the information out and let's shake out what we think and what we know. Here's something I do know. John Robinson is not going to bet the farm on Julio Jones. I think if John thought betting the farm on somebody was worth betting the farm on one guy, he would do it. He's not going to bet the farm on Julio Jones. He is willing to make tough decisions. He is willing to make sacrifices. They wanted the best possible deal for Derrick Henry. They sacrificed Jack Conklin in the process because they franchise tagged Derrick Henry and they didn't franchise tag Conklin. There were people that said, hey, it's that offensive line more so than it's the running back. Pay the offensive line before you pay the running back. Robinson wasn't going to do that. So he's willing to bet the farm on Derrick Henry. I understand that. He wasn't willing to bet the farm on Corey Davis. He wasn't willing to bet the farm on Jonnu Smith with a franchise tag. He's just not willing to take humongous risks for the what if. They took the risk on Clowney, but that wasn't betting the farm. That was betting the cushion they had. Now they don't have the cushion because of that risk they took. So Robinson is not afraid to go after it if he feels like he wants to do it. But I think we know Robinson's MO well enough to know he is not putting everything into the kitty on Julio Jones and hoping that it works. So go ahead and put that over there. Then there is the Rams and the Patriots. And I find these two teams to be pretty interesting. The Rams, I don't even know if they have a salary cap. I also don't even know if the Rams have anything to trade, because the Rams are the definition of the impulsive family that is run by the 8-year-old child who gets everything they want. Sean McVay loves his quarterback. Give him $140 million guaranteed. Sean McVay hates his quarterback. Trade him in 3 first-round picks and get Matthew Stafford in there. Sean McVay wants Jalen Ramsey. Give him Jalen Ramsey. So they've done this with the Rams. Again, I don't know how you have a roster of paying Jared Goff money, Matthew Stafford money, Jalen Ramsey money, Aaron Donald money. I don't know how you have a team like that. Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp money. I don't know how you can afford that in the NFL. So the Rams are up against it, and you hear the Rams could be involved in the Julio thing, which would be very similar to when they traded for Brandon Cooks or whatever. I still just don't think the Rams have the money to do this. At some point, you have to run out of assets that you can trade or that you can pick up.
Well, they also have 0 first-round picks. They give away first-round picks like candy.
They don't believe in the first round. And I'm the kind of guy who does believe in the first round. Robinson hasn't been great in the first round, but I'm the kind of guy who believes in the first round of the draft. But the Rams don't. The Rams, to me, are a player in this because they're willing to do whatever it takes to get whatever they want when they want it. And that's where I can't rule the Rams out, even though I don't have any idea how the Rams could take that on. Then there's New England. And New England is the opposite of the Rams. New England will pay top dollar when they feel like it. New England will give a first-round draft choice in a trade when they feel like it. But it's almost always on their terms. The Rams do things on everybody else's terms. Jalen Ramsey is unhappy in Jacksonville, and he's definitely out. We'll give you 2 first-round picks. Here you go. They do things on other people's terms. New England does things on their terms. With a rookie quarterback, with a first-round pick for 2 years of Julio, where really 2 years is what you're getting, would that be what puts you over the top? Like, this is a coach slash, director of operations for the team and Bill Belichick. This is a guy who never pays top of the market unless it is a star in their prime who can help that day. He paid top of the market over the last 6 years. Belichick, in my opinion, has paid top of the market twice. He paid top of the market for Jonnu Smith this year, and he paid top of the market for Stephon Gilmore. Now, I don't love Jonnu Smith at top of the market, but obviously Belichick did. And Belichick clearly wanted it because they had to deal with Jonnu about 3 seconds after free agency started. Is Belichick really going to go top of the market for Julio? That doesn't seem very Belichick-like. So I hear that, and I'm trying to put together what I know of these teams and what I hear of the reporting. And what I have decided is that all of this is hard to judge what 32 teams would do, and we don't know every single team. We don't know these new general managers, new coaches, new owners. Like, what's the guy in Denver think? I don't know. I have no idea what the guy in Denver thinks. But I can't see Belichick paying top of the market for Julio Jones because that's not his MO. I can't see Robinson paying top of the market for Julio Jones. That's not his MO. I can't see the Rams paying top of the market for Julio Jones because I don't think they can afford to do it, nor do I think they have the draft capital to be able to pull that off. So something right here is not adding up. Atlanta wants a first, and the teams involved, Tennessee, the Rams, and the Patriots, according to Dan Graziano today, those seem to me like the teams that don't totally add up. Remember when J.J. Watt hit free agency and everybody was talking about, okay, what teams make sense for J.J.? Well, J.J. wants to win a championship, so J.J. is probably going to go to Kansas City or Tampa Bay or Cleveland or Tennessee or Oh, and by the way, JJ wants to get paid too. So he might not be able to go to Kansas City, and he might not be able to go to Tampa Bay, but Cleveland's got money. Maybe Cleveland. He went to the Arizona Cardinals. That was a team nobody talked about. But Arizona said, we got the money, here you go. It feels to me like that's the road we're going with Julio. Is that same J.J. Watt kind of thing where, New England makes sense because the Rams make sense because the Titans make sense because the Arizona Cardinals. Now, I don't know who out there has the cap space to do this. I don't know who's totally up against it. But I guess what I'm saying is I wouldn't be stunned if I saw, Julio Jones got traded to the Washington football team. And you're like, what? Well, Washington offered a second this year and a conditional third next year that becomes a one if Julio plays into the second season. And, okay, fine. Washington. They'll do that. The Raiders, the Jets, Jacksonville, like those teams that do those kind of things and have the money afforded to them to be able to do so. So I read the reporting like that. I know it's crazy, but I almost feel like we're looking at Julio and saying, well, the Titans could do this, but it doesn't match up with the MO of what the Titans want to do unless Atlanta's just flat out lying that they don't have a first-round pick on the table for Julio Jones.
Which is likely, and I don't want to say that anybody who has done reporting is lying by any means, but they report what they hear, and people can say a lot of things. We noticed that in the draft. People can just plant little things in a little birdie's ear, and then it starts to blow up. So the fact that Diana Rossini reported that Atlanta had a first-round pick on the table, is that true? Is it not? I don't know, but I would be very shocked if it was true.
615-737-1025 is our phone number. We will get to your reaction on this. And speaking of Julio, Teddy Bruschi lays out kind of what he sees, especially when talking about the Rams and talking about the Patriots. And Teddy Bruschi lays that out. And why I think Teddy really knows. I think Teddy today tells you what's going to happen with Julio. And I think it gets done this week. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. We, of course, will get to your calls and your texts as we always do. Listen to 1025 The Game every weekday for your chance to win $1,000. It's the game's 1K payday presented by Kentucky Kingdom and Hurricane Bay. Listen for keywords at 9, noon, and 3. When you hear it, go to thegamenashville.com and enter the keyword for a shot at $1,000. Stillman Company is delivered by TriStar Moving. It's ESPN 1025 The Game.
Wherever Julio goes, your offense is instantly better. That was very interesting what Graz was talking about with the Rams because, I mean, Stafford knows what it's like to throw to big receivers like that when he had Calvin Johnson. I don't know what the Rams can give up in terms of draft picks for Julio Jones for a team that I don't think has any draft picks, but they've been trading away first-round picks like they're going out of style. I don't think they have another one till 2024, but I tell you, him in that offense, it would be a good, not a good fit, but man, Stafford and Julio Jones, I like that. The New England perspective is unique to me because, I mean, you have Cam Newton, and Cam Newton's basically your quarterback, and he's almost your best running back in terms of the threat that he poses. Do you really put it on Cam Newton to spread it out to Smith, to Henry, to Aguilar, to Jones? I don't know if he's that type of quarterback anymore. So is this a move to where you lean for the future with Mac Jones? I mean, do they see Mac Jones playing sooner than later? That's the thing that makes me think about if Julio's a possibility here. So two interesting perspectives from the Rams to the Patriots. But I believe there's a team that can come out of nowhere and just say, the best you got's a 3. Well, I got a 2 for you. So anything can happen with Julio.
There you go. That was Teddy Bruschi. And it doesn't sound to me, Caroline, like Teddy Bruschi is really all that sold on either the two teams that Graziano laid out ahead of the Titans, the Rams or the Patriots, acquiring Julio Jones.
It doesn't. And it would make sense scheme-wise for Julio to be in New England, but then you think about the logistics of what would have to happen for Julio to end up in New England, and that just doesn't sound like a Bill Belichick move to me.
No, not they want a first-round pick. They want you to take on $15 million. They want you. So I pulled this up, overthecap.com. I feel like they probably give you the best insight into actual salary cap space. Mm-hmm. Overthecap.com has all of the cap space, which teams have cap space. And you heard Teddy right there, and you heard what Teddy said about, it could be some team that comes out of nowhere that ends up doing this. So right now, the teams that have been discussed for Julio Jones, the Ravens have $9 million, $9.7 million in cap space, according to overthecap.com. The Seahawks have 7.25. The Rams have $7 million. The Titans have 3.2. In fact, according to this, only the Saints, Falcons, and Bucks have less money against the cap than the Titans do. So the Titans are not in a good cap spot. This, again, goes back to last year and the decision to sign Clowney, which we talked about a lot and basically said it was a terrible idea. And here you are with $3 million in cap space. Here are the teams that could afford Julio Jones without having to make another subsequent move. Because, again, Atlanta has $337,000 in cap space. They're looking for you to take the money. The money may be more important than the actual return that they get. The Jaguars, the Broncos, the Jets, the Bengals, the Browns, the Chargers, the Lions, the 49ers, the Panthers, the Washington football team, and the Patriots all have enough money to absorb Julio Jones today.
The Colts are just underneath that $15 million.
The Colts are just underneath it, and the Colts don't like going outside the box.
Right.
I mean, Indy likes doing things. Outside of the Carson Wentz move, everything Indianapolis has done appears to me to be with a cap-first thinking. Every year, Indianapolis has a ton of cap space, and then it comes to free agency, and they may make a big move here or there, but they really kind of sit on that cash, and they don't just blindly throw it away like the Jets do, and like Cleveland did for so many years. So, of these teams, I think we can rule out. Mm-hmm. The Jets, I think we can rule out. They used a second-round pick on Elijah Moore. They used a second-round pick last year on Denzel Mims. They paid Corey Davis. Take the Jets out of it. The Bengals, I think you can take out of it after using the 5th overall pick on Jamar Chase. I feel like between him and Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins, I feel like they're pretty set there. Take the Bengals out of it. The Browns. The Browns would make sense, but they have Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. They're a running team.
That's a whole lot of older wide receivers that have a huge price tag.
So I can't see the Browns. The Chargers at $19.85 million. The Chargers have Justin Herbert, young quarterback. They have Keenan Allen, a legitimate number one receiver, although Keenan's probably not number one anymore, but he obviously is pretty good. They could do it. The Chargers, in theory, could do it, and it would make sense, especially being in Los Angeles, where I'm not a huge, the stars rule the world kind of guy, but flip on Colin Cowherd, and that's all they ever talk about. Are the stars rule the world? And in Los Angeles, you got to have the stars. So maybe the Chargers, they make sense. Lions, no. 49ers at 17.6. Now here's where the 49ers come into play. They don't have any picks. So they could try to make a move for Julio, but they would legitimately have to absorb the entire salary because they don't have first-round picks in each of the next 2 years. And I mean, are you really, if you say you're going for your quarterback of the future, so you deal 2 first-round picks, are you really going to deal your second-round picks away too? Like, that one I struggle with the 49ers. The Panthers, maybe. They lost Curtis Samuel. Darnold's in at quarterback.
They've got Robbie Anderson.
You give Darnold some help by adding Julio Jones. Atlanta takes some of the money, but you get Julio Jones. They, I think, are a factor.
A Christian McCaffrey, Julio Jones offense. Don't hate it.
I worry about McCaffrey's health, but that's neither here nor there. So, again, I think these are the teams that we should really be talking about. The Panthers, the Chargers, Washington, the 49ers, Jacksonville. Bill Barnwell, ESPN, came out with an article last week, said best fit in his mind, his prediction on the Julio trade, Jacksonville. And let's not forget one really important element of a Julio Jones trade. Julio's under contract.
Right.
Julio is not in a position to say, I don't want to go there. Now, NFL players do that, and it's it's got a little bit of NBA to it, but Julio is under contract, and if Atlanta can get Carolina, now again, Carolina's weird in the division, but if Atlanta can get Denver, or if they can get Carolina, or if they can get the Chargers to take on the full amount of money, or give them a good pick in return, what do they care what Julio thinks? Why would I care what Julio? Hey, Julio, we're sending you to the Chargers. Wait a minute. I thought I was going to New England or Tennessee. Yeah, well, the Chargers decided to take on all the money, so you're going to the Chargers for a second-round pick. What's Julio going to do? I mean, Julio's out of Atlanta, so maybe he gets what he wants, but what's Julio going to do? So I think this is a lot like the J.J. Watt situation, which is the teams that you don't expect to make a play here, I think are the ones that are going to make the play on Julio. I don't think it's going to be the Seahawks and their $7.25 million worth of space, the Ravens and their $9 million worth of space, the Rams and their $7+ million in space, the Titans and their – I don't think you're going to see those moves made.
Well, I don't think it even makes sense for Seattle to make a move for Julio Jones. I think they're set in their wide receiver core. It just doesn't seem like a move where you just start collecting really talented wide receivers that are all very, very expensive.
Sure.
They've got Tyler Lockett, they've got DK Metcalf, and they also have a huge price tag in Russell Wilson. So I just don't think it even makes sense for them to add another wide receiver to that roster.
All right, we'll get to your reaction. I see it lining up, so we will do that next. 615-737-1025. Graziano says maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow on a possible Julio move. If there is not a possible Julio move today or tomorrow, then I think that should turn our ears up a little bit. We'll get to that next. And your reaction, Stillman Company, right here on ESPN 1025 The Game, or streaming on the Game Nashville app.
Well, I already think that we're in a situation with Julio Jones where when he says he wants out, this is a you can't fire me, I quit scenario. Like, the Falcons already, when they had this new regime come in, knew that they were going to have to move on from Julio Jones when they looked at the cap number, when they looked at just all sorts of different dynamics. So I don't think any of this is a surprise to the Falcons. I think they've been having conversations behind the scenes. Guys, we know, Tannenbaum knows as well as anybody, everybody around the league kind of knows behind the scenes that he's available. So the price already has been kind of plummeting since the perception was that he's not available. I honestly do think that we're looking at the Falcons holding out for maybe a second-round pick, kind of holding on to him until the leverage gets high enough, maybe a bidding war, but we're really talking about third, second-round pick at this point. I would be shocked if he gets traded for anything more, like a first-round pick. To me, that's off the table at this point.
That was Jeff Darlington on ESPN. Let me just say, before we get to your phones, I promise we'll get to your phones, I have a rule on this. I shouldn't say a rule on this show. I am creating a new rule on this show. Are you okay with that? Because I don't think I've really gone over, Caroline, what the rules on this show are.
I think I've just been figuring them out day by day.
Okay, so for example, one rule is one report does not make it the truth.
Correct.
2, you can't get in trouble for something you haven't done yet.
Yes.
And I think there are more along the way, but we'll just pick them up. Add this one to it. I think I'm going to roll with Jeff Darlington. You know, like, I think of all the people who, do you believe, do you not believe, do you this, do you that? I mean, like, if Adam Schefter goes on television and says, sources are telling me Aaron Rodgers is being traded to the Dallas Cowboys, well, then Ian Rappaport's going to pick that up 5 seconds later. Schefter only reports what he hears. And then you can hear it in a Schefter report when he's talking about something, because if he doesn't really know, then he'll just tell you what everybody already knows in his Adam Schefter I know tone, and there's a lot of thoughts, and then Adam just starts speculating. And that I don't really care for. Darlington last spring, before the pandemic started, Darlington was a humongous believer in going on television and telling people in his reporting that Tom Brady was interested in leaving New England. We even had Darlington on the show after he talked about that, because Darlington had a lot of insight on Tennessee and the idea of Brady going to New England. And Floyd kind of, brushed it off and just said, no, Tom's going to go back, Tom's going to go back. And Darlington was right. When all of the national media, the insiders, were just ripping the Titans to shreds over COVID, Schefter did it, Florio did it, Glazer did it, Pelissero and the other one, Rappaport, did it. They just ripped the Titans to shreds. And we even had Florio on the show and said, he was hearing that someone speculated Robinson and Vrabel could have been suspended for the rest of the year. And it ended up being nothing. We didn't hear Darlington come out and say that. So I think I'm this in Jeff Darlington we trust kind of guy. If Darlington says the Falcons are holding out for maybe a second-round pick, then that means that they even know they're not going to get a first-round pick. So I'm rolling with Darlington on this one. Let's go to your phone. 615-737-1025. Phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Havo is going to start us off on Julio Jones and the Titans tight end. Thank you for calling. Go ahead, Havo.
Hey, what's up, guys? How you guys doing?
Good.
All right, so I know you touched on that we do need a tight end, and I get what you're saying. But if you look at Jonnu Smith's stats, last year he only had, not even 500 yards, I think. It was 450 or something around there.
Correct.
And if you get Julio into our offense, you have arguably the best running back in the NFL, upcoming star in A.J. Brown, which I think he's going to be a top 5 receiver soon. And then you put Julio into the mix. Honestly, I think Frisco could do a great job. I think he could do just as what Jonnu Smith did. I think he could do that with Julio Jones over there as well. And I think we're going to be contenders with Julio. I really truly believe that.
So,
and I'll hang up and get
I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate your call. Who goes into the game on 3rd and 4? That's my question here. Everyone talks about receiving and tight end. It's not just a one-for-one trade. That is, okay, you acquire Julio Jones, and between Julio and Josh Reynolds, they have more yards than Jonnu Smith did last year. Because if it's 3rd and 4 right now, who goes in for the Titans at tight end? And I understand the idea of somebody saying, I think Ferkser can play tight end. I'd put him out there and let him block. Matt LaFleur didn't let Anthony Ferkser block. Arthur Smith didn't let Anthony Ferkser block. And they certainly didn't let Anthony Ferkser block last year. So if Vrabel's not going to let the guy block, Arthur's not going to let the guy block, LaFleur's not going to let the guy block, that gives me an idea that his strong suit is not, blocking. And to take it one step further, Anthony Ferkser is a converted wide receiver. He played wide receiver at Harvard, wasn't fast enough to play wide receiver in the NFL, so he puts on weight and he moves to tight end. The idea that this guy, a practice squad kind of guy, can all of a sudden be as productive both in the blocking game and passing game as a guy that Bill Belichick just gave $50 million to does not add up for me.
What if he gets hurt?
Ferkser?
Yes.
Well, you have to take that with anybody.
Yes,
So
of course. But when you're talking
sure,
about tight end depth, because if everyone's going to say, oh, well, Anthony Ferkser's there.
So I'm not worried about depth because depth, and I mean, in theory, you probably should be, but where this comes into play is when I ask who goes in the game on 3rd and 4. The other alternative is Jeff Swain. Mm-hmm. But what you become in that scenario is a team that tells the other team what they're doing when they do it. 3rd down and 1, you're putting Swain into the game. Everybody knows that. But on 3rd down and 4, that is in theory a passing down. But you've got Derrick Henry. 3rd down and 3, you've got Derrick Henry. And the last thing you want to do is tell the other team. And I sometimes thought that Arthur Smith did this a little too much when he had Derrick Henry and he had a starting tight end. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to tell the other team, hey, defense, we're throwing. Hey, defense, we're running. And if you go into 3rd and 4 and Darrington Evans comes into the game and so does Anthony Ferkser, you're telling the defense what you're going to do on 3rd down and 4. Tannehill is only an effective passer because of the play action. He wasn't good enough to be a starter in Miami until the play action revived his career. So the ability to get a defense to think that you are running and then you throw is the hallmark of what the Titans do. It is why Tannehill is successful. So I understand the idea of everyone saying, well, Jonnu only had 400-something receiving yards last year. I don't see how Ferkser can't get that. I think Julio can get more than that. Sure. But you need a tight end to block. Like, Derrick Henry rushed for 2,000 yards last year. So you need a tight end to block. What do we have in the text line?
One texter texted in and said, go get Cameron Brate for tight end.
Okay.
Tight end out of Tampa Bay.
So is he still on Tampa Bay's roster?
I believe
so. Or did he get released?
As far as I know, he is still on the Tampa Bay roster, but I can do a quick check for it.
Well, because the reason I say this is there are going to be tight ends who are out there, and I would agree that, hey, go get Cameron Brate. He can come in and be a tight end. Go get Zach Ertz. He can come in and be a tight end. Make a trade for Hayden Hurst. He can come in and be a tight end. Mm-hmm. But then what does that do to all of the people that say, well, Julio's salary is not that big of a deal if you did. Again, $15 million in 2021 money is a lot in the NFL. It's almost like the opposite of inflation. You know, when money becomes less valuable is when inflation goes up. So when you've got a salary cap, the NBA went through this a couple of years ago. I think they were making like $400 million a year in their TV deals. And then all of a sudden, those TV deals shot up to like $1.2 billion and $1.4 billion. And the NBA, all of a sudden, a collectively bargained sport, had just oodles of cash to fire off at free agency. So guys like Marcin Gortat and Matthew Dellavedova and guys that were, just bench players were getting like $38 million contracts because the teams had to spend the money. The NFL this year is the opposite of that, which is $15 million for a wide receiver in 2019 when that deal was signed with the expectation that the cap would go up is not that big of a deal on the Julio Jones front. But the money is scarce now. So when you're talking about the Titans trading for a Julio Jones, well, now you can't get a starting tight end if you do that. You can't get a kicker if you do that. You can't improve depth at outside linebacker. You can't pick up a slot receiver unless you move Josh Reynolds into the slot with Julio going outside. So it really limits your ability to do all of those things. And that's where I look at the Cameron Brate, and I'm like, hey, is Cameron Brate a number one tight end in the NFL? Probably not. like he's a number 2. Tampa Bay's plan was always O.J. Howard as the number 1, Brate as the 2. Brate was a good number 2. They signed Rob Gronkowski. Okay, now Brate kind of moves down a little bit. O.J. Howard's kind of iffy all the time, whatever. But at least he could start at tight end in the NFL. And that's all. I just need a guy who can start at tight end in the NFL to play tight end. I don't need a superstar. I just need somebody who's a legitimate starter. Anthony Ferkser is not a starting tight end in the NFL. He may be your starting tight end, but he is not a starting tight end in the NFL, just like Case Keenum is not a starting quarterback in the NFL. What else we got?
Ben texted in and said, is Julio Jones really the missing piece for the Titans to get to a Super Bowl? I have my doubts considering they still have questions at pass rush, offensive coordinator, and uncertainty at cornerback. I don't know what the uncertainty at cornerback is, I guess.
No, they have uncertainty at corner. I mean, Caleb Farley right now, medical question marks. Christian Fulton didn't play last year. Elijah Molden is hurt. Janoris Jenkins is old, and Kevin Johnson sucks. I think there's a lot of questions at cornerback.
Yes, but I wouldn't say that that's a position group that the Titans need to go out and get.
So I would say that you can never have enough of that. I mean, again, I'm with you. I don't think they need
Fair.
to add a corner today, but I could see that corner depth getting real thin real quickly this season, and I worry about it. But then again, like last year, they thought they had figured that out when they signed Jonathan Joseph, and he was atrocious. So I think there's probably something to that. I mean, like, kicker could be on the roster right now. Mm-hmm. That kid from Ohio State could be the kicker. I've been told Tucker McCann's got a really strong leg. But to me, they do not have a kicker right now. And you cannot go into the season without a kicker. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Mike Tannenbaum said today what he thinks the Atlanta Falcons are going to do or should do as far as Julio is concerned. And let's put yourself in the Titans' position, and this happens. We'll get to that next. Stillman Company, we are delivered by TriStar Moving. It's ESPN 1025 The Game. We're streaming on the Game Nashville app and, of course, live every day on Twitter. Just look at my Twitter, the 1025 The Game Twitter, and YouTube. So be watching the show there. 615-737-1025. It's ESPN 1025 The Game. We're streaming on the Game Nashville app. Stillman Company is delivered by TriStar Moving, ESPN 1025. The game, the Julio Jones sweepstakes, and now taking the forefront as if it hadn't already. But now that it's June 1st, the Julio Jones sweepstakes are coming to a head. At some point, Atlanta's going to have to move them because at some point, Atlanta's going to have to sign those rookies, and they've got like $600,000 in cap space. So I'm guessing they're going to have to make a move. So I'm a big real estate guy. I shouldn't say a big real estate guy. I don't have like an empire of properties or anything like that, but I own a couple of houses. I own 2 houses and a townhome, and I believe in real estate. You know, you and I have talked about this on the air, off the air. You know, the Bitcoin guys and the cryptocurrency people and those guys, they take this stuff. They're like, this is the wave of the future. And maybe they're right. Maybe I'm wrong. But I'm a huge believer in buying when the market is low, and then when the market gets hot, either making your profit there by selling it or by reaping the benefits of having bought low. Your mortgage is low, an area becomes desirable, now rents go up, you rent it out, you make your money, whatever. But I don't like paying at the top of the market. Right now in Nashville, the housing market is at the top of the market. I mean, it is houses that 3 years ago would have gone for $300,000 are now in the $600,000, $550,000, that kind of range. It is insane. People are moving from California. People are moving from different parts of the country where they're taxed higher, and they want to come to Tennessee, specifically Nashville, because it's the best city in Tennessee, obviously. And they want to come to Tennessee, and they've got cash to pay. And it is hard right now to get a house. You are not going to get the best deal if you try to buy right now. What a lot of realtors are doing is they are taking that blind offer, which is we will be accepting offers until 7 o'clock Monday night, because that creates urgency. That creates you, the buyer, if you're interested in that house, get that offer in today, because if you don't get your best offer in today, then they're going to sell it to somebody else, and you're going to lose the house. The 2 homes that I own, like the 2 homes, the one I lived in last year, the one I live in this year, both significantly under the asking price. They had been on the market for months, and they didn't get any buyers. I was able to negotiate. I was able to get in under the ask. So Mike Tannenbaum today on ESPN was talking about what he would do if he was general manager of the Falcons, and how it is eerily similar to the market, the housing market here in Nashville. Take a listen.
Mike Tannenbaum, you've always got answers for me here. If you're the general manager in Atlanta right now, tell me how this is playing out. What are you doing on the phones as you try to figure out how and when you're going to trade Julio Jones?
I'm taking a list of those teams that Dan just gave us, and I'm saying, I need your best offer by the end of the day today. And don't complain tomorrow that you would have done more when I trade him to Team X, because this is going to happen, and it's going to happen fast. And that's the only way I really can create a sense of urgency, and here's why. It's been so public that you simply can't tell another team, if we don't get the offer we like, he's going to come back and be a Falcon. That's off the table. So the best way to create a sense of urgency is, I need your final and best offer today.
So there you go. Just like a house, we're taking all offers until 6 o'clock Monday night. Get your best offer in. If you're the Titans and you get that call from Atlanta, what is the best offer you could put together for Julio Jones? I'm putting you guys on the spot. Caroline, I'm putting you on the spot. Ian, I'm putting you on the spot. And I will just tell you right now, I will go last. So I'm really putting you guys on the spot. I know what I would offer. What would you? I'm Atlanta. I call you today. I want your final offer by 6 o'clock tonight. What's your final offer?
I would offer a 2022 third, a 2023 fourth, and partial salary.
So you want them to take on salary?
Yes.
How much?
So it's 15. I wouldn't want the Titans paying more than 8 to 10.
Okay. So you want Atlanta to retain roughly $5 million in salary.
Roughly.
Let's say $6 million.
Yeah, between 5 and 7.
So Atlanta retains $6 million in salary, and you're willing to give a 2023 third and a
2022 third,
2023 and a 2023 fourth.
Yes. I don't think they're going to take that.
But that would be your final offer.
Yes.
Ian, what would your final offer to Atlanta be?
That's a good question. That sounds like a pretty fair offer. I think what Caroline put out there, as far as if you're the Titans to put out there. But I mean, it's just hard to know how badly the Titans really want them, how bad he really wants them, you know. But I guess if I'm the GM and how badly I would really want him, I don't know. My thing with Julio is we talked a lot about this with Clowney and what offenses would have to do to scheme against Clowney and how that didn't really pan out like some people had hoped. I wonder what that is with Julio. Like, would he really make an impact as far as what defenses are willing to scheme against the Titans?
Sure.
You know, and if you can convince me that teams would still, you know, like who are they going to put their number one DB on? We assume it'll be A.J. Brown every time. But if it's not every time, you know, is it worth it? Can Julio really match up against legit number 2 DBs and still win on a consistent basis? If you can convince me he can do that, I would be willing to up the price a little bit to pay for him.
So Robbie Stanley just texted me and said his final offer would be a 2022 second rounder and he'd take on the full salary. And let me just state for the record that if I owned the Titans and Robbie Stanley did that, I would fire him as my general manager because that's ridiculous.
Too high, you think?
Full salary?
Yeah. I mean, I said I wouldn't do it.
Here's the problem with that. And I understand again, I get the housing market and I get what they do when they say, we want your final offers. That is a seller saying, I don't want my house on the market for 6 months.
We're done now.
Every single time it be this long process of, well, Jared's willing to pay this much money. And it's, I had my final number. When I bought this house, I had my final number, and I offered $50,000 less than my final number. They don't want that.
Because it'll only go up.
Right. But I offered, right. They're going to want to negotiate more. They don't want to do this. Atlanta doesn't want to waste all the time, go back and forth. I get it. But if they do this, if I'm the Titans, and I get a call, and they say, like Mike Tannenbaum said, give us your final offer by 6 o'clock tonight, and don't come to me tomorrow and say, oh, well, I would have offered more if I had known. I'm not sure I put in an offer on Julio Jones. And here's why I'm not sure that I put in an offer on Julio. I like what you said about how much of the salary you're willing to take on and how much you expect Atlanta to take on. But I then have to create that salary space, regardless of how much money Atlanta takes on. Mm-hmm. So in order to do this, I have to go to Tannehill, or I have to go to Lewan, or I have to cut Saffold in order to create the salary space for me to then be able to take Julio Jones. Well, I don't want to have to make that move unless I know that I'm getting the player. If I send an offer to Atlanta of, I'm willing to offer you a second-round pick next year and I'm going to take on full salary, Atlanta's going to want to execute the deal immediately. Well, now I have to get Tannehill to sign a deal that is going to be more favorable to him, a restructure. I'm going to have to make some other moves. You and I talked about it before the show. The crowd that thinks it is as simple as restructure Tannehill and you're good to get Julio, it doesn't work like that. It is not that simple. So now I got to make about 8 different moves because I just committed myself in this blind draw and I still may not even get the guy. And I'm not willing to do that. I do not believe the Tennessee Titans are willing to do this at Julio's price. Just like I don't think they were willing to do it at J.J. Watt's price. Just like they weren't willing to do it at Clowney's price until Clowney's price dropped. The deals they like to make like this are the DeMarco Murray trades, where you swap picks in the 4th round and you get DeMarco to take a better contract on your terms. And if DeMarco had said no to that, then they wouldn't have done it. But remember, Philadelphia didn't tell people, get us your final offer on DeMarco today. And so I just don't think the Titans, I would not, if I were the Titans, I would not put in something on a blind post. That is, here's my final offer, take it or leave it. My gut tells me the Titans have already told the Falcons what they're willing to do. that the Titans have told Atlanta when Diana Rossini reported last week that the Titans have kicked the tires on Julio, but it would be a long shot. My guess is the Titans told Atlanta, this is what we're willing to do, and we're not moving off of it. And just like I think with Clowney, when he was out there in the spring and he was looking for $20+ million a year, and it came out that Tennessee had kicked the tires on Clowney, and the Titans had said that they'd kick. So if you want to go out and see if there's 16 or 18 million there, go ahead. But we view you in the 12 million range. And then when Clowney couldn't get a deal he liked, he came back and said, okay, I'm willing to do the $12 million range. My guess is the Titans have already made that offer to Atlanta, that if they are serious about acquiring Julio, here are the terms. This is our best offer. Now, maybe everybody else is trying to haggle, or maybe Atlanta's trying to haggle with them to see if they can squeeze something more out. But I don't think that's Robinson's MO. So I would not make an offer if I were the Titans. I guess I'm kind of changing the game here because I put you on the spot. And I made you guys give me an offer there. I still think an overpay. I still think it's an overpay. A 2022 third and a 2024 fourth. And I'm still taking on $11 million in salary when I've got 3 under the cap. I still think that's an overpay for Julio Jones, and I'm taking 11 onto next year's cap. Mm-hmm. That's an overpay for me on Julio Jones.
Yeah, I anything that you have to completely blow up your offense and affect the contracts of the future drastically that may or may not put your team in a better position, I don't think is worth it for Julio Jones. I hear you. I know who he is, and I know what he is capable of, and I know the needs of this Titans team. I just don't think what the Titans could appropriately offer is worth it.
How do you think the fans would feel? Like, how would Titan fans feel if Atlanta were to do something like this? Again, Mike Tannenbaum suggesting that basically a blind post. It's what Japanese baseball players do to come to America, is their team posts them, and it's a blind process. You put in your final offer, and then the Japanese team takes the best offer, and then the team can sign that Japanese player. It's very similar to this. If the Falcons went around the league and said, give me your best offer on Julio, I need it by 6 o'clock tonight, and the Titans didn't make an offer on Julio, how upset would the fans be if they found that out?
Oh, they would be livid. Fans want Julio because, A.J. Brown has made it very clear that he wants Julio. Mm-hmm. Derrick Henry said he possibly said there have been swirlings rumors around that Derrick Henry said he would be okay with restructuring his contract for Julio. And I think that a lot of Titans fans are getting their hopes up since the Tennessee Titans have been in consideration for Julio Jones. So I think that they would be really frustrated knowing that the Titans didn't even put in an offer.
So then you would almost want to put in an offer that's almost a categorically just ridiculous lowball.
Which is
hey, we made an offer.
Which is kind of what my offer was based off of. Not completely something that the Titans that the Falcons would completely turn away 100%. It's an offer. It's something. You're not blowing your entire team up, but it's something.
You could live with this, though. Like, I think when you put this offer together,
2022 third, 2023 fourth, and $8 to $10 million of Julio's contract.
You're not expecting to get Julio?
I don't think so.
And I think you could live if that's what you had to pay with.
I feel like I'm kind of living in the middle ground there.
Let's take your phones. 615-737-1025. What would your offer be if Mike Tannenbaum is right and that the move on Julio is get us your best offer, and that tonight and tomorrow is when the talks would intensify, given the fact that we are now officially in June and you can spread out dead money over 2 years? 615-737-1025. What would you want the Titans to offer? 615-737-1025. Stillman Company. We are delivered by TriStar Moving. It's ESPN 1025 The Game. We're live from the wholesaling studio, powered by RumbleOn.com, and we're streaming on the Game Nashville app.
I've been told that the Titans have had conversations with Atlanta. Atlanta has taken calls from a lot of different teams, but in terms of realistically happening, a source shared with me, it most likely will not happen with the Tennessee Titans. It always could, but at this point right now, the Tennessee Titans I would not consider to be a lead contender in landing Julio Jones after that June 1 date.
That was Diana Rossini. We know Diana Rossini is connected with the Titans. So we know that that's probably a Titan source telling Diana it's probably not going to happen on the Julio front. But as we talked about in the last segment, Caroline, the people will be mad if the Titans don't make an offer. So again, Mike Tannenbaum said today if he was general manager of the Falcons, he'd be taking in final offers today from everybody. Give me your best offer. And I love how Tannenbaum threw in there, too, and don't come to me tomorrow and say, I would have offered more. Mike, these are general managers. They're not 8-year-olds. But I understand the sentiment. So the best deal that we could put together, I said I would not do it on Atlanta's terms of give me a final offer. I would not do it on Atlanta's terms. Caroline says a 2022 third-round pick, a 2023 fourth-round pick, and Atlanta eats $6 million of the $15.3 million salary. One, I don't think it gets it done. And two, to me, that's probably too much salary to take on. That's a lot of salary.
That is a lot of salary.
But I asked the question to be about you, so let's go to your phone. 615-737-1025. Our phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Caroline Fenton, what do we have in the text line?
Nate texted in and said, I think in order for Atlanta to eat salary, it's going to cost at least a second-round pick. I think he's right there. I think so. At least a second-round pick. And it also depends on how much of the salary that you're eating.
Okay, let's be realistic about this. Do you think Julio Jones, with all the salary retained by Atlanta, could get a first-round pick? Do you think that there is a team out there that would deal a first-round pick if they didn't have to pay Julio salary this year, but they'd have to pay it next year at 11.3?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Would I do it? No. But I do think there are teams out there, like the Rams, that don't care about first-round picks. They're willing to deal them out. I know they don't, but I'm saying, that kind of philosophy.
But all the teams that don't care about picks don't have picks.
That's true.
The Seahawks don't have picks. So the
Seahawks also don't need a wide receiver.
I'm just saying, though, Graziano reported earlier today that the Seahawks want in, but they can't see their way into the discussion.
It just doesn't make sense to me.
But the teams that don't care about first-round picks don't have them. So the idea of, Atlanta doesn't care about picks, so they can just trade. They don't have any picks. So how can they trade if they don't have any picks?
There have been a few texts in the text line that have had kind of the sentiment of Titans fans would be okay with offering a first-round pick because they don't necessarily trust John Robinson's first-round picks the past few years. So they're okay with just getting rid of it and getting a guy who's a little bit more guaranteed than somebody that John Robinson could draft in the first round.
So I don't live in the world of what I would do, things with the Predators, where I feel like the local media won't discuss the things that they should do because they're more focused on what they will do. So if they don't think ownership will move on from David Poile, Adam Vingan doesn't want to talk about it. Mm-hmm. Even though when they're losing, Adam has no problem of asking David Poile, you think you're going to lose your job? But then he doesn't think they're going to get rid of David Poile, so he won't write about it. And that's where I disagree with him. I'm like, I think that if you think the guy should be gone, you should say the guy should be gone regardless. So I can appreciate the fans that say, I don't trust Robinson in the first round in order to make a good selection next year. So I'd rather trade that first rounder to get Julio Jones back. The problem with that is twofold. One, I'm not sure Atlanta is in a place where they could take on the full salary to get a first-round pick because they've only got $700,000 worth of cap space. So I don't think they can take on the full salary for a first-round pick. And the second thing is, a lot like, again, how Adam Vingan, for example, doesn't think that the Predators will move on from David Poile, so he stopped bringing up the issue. I understand you, the fan, thinking that Robinson isn't a good drafter in the first round. But Robinson probably doesn't think that Robinson is a bad drafter.
Right.
And so he probably thinks that next year's first-round pick is going to the Hall of Fame. Just like he thinks Caleb Farley is probably going to be a top-flight corner. That's why he drafted him in the first round. The second that John Robinson starts to look at the results like we look at the results and says, oh, I don't know if I can draft in the first round, is the second that he needs to retire or he needs to get out. Because if you don't think you can draft in the first round, you cannot be a general manager in the NFL. And so that's how I feel about, this pick right here with the idea of, well, you know what? Robinson, I think Fitz came on the show last week and said, well, Isaiah Wilson was a first-round pick, so who cares about picks? I care. The one time that this franchise has made it to the Super Bowl, they had drafted 19 of the 22 starters that had played in that Super Bowl. Their first-round pick, Steve McNair, was a starting quarterback. I think if you go back all the way to like 93, their first-round pick, Brad Hopkins, was a left tackle. First-round pick in 95, Steve McNair was the starting quarterback. First-round pick in 96, Eddie George was the running back. First-round pick in 97, Henry Ford was a defensive lineman on that team. First-round pick in 98 was Kevin Dyson, starting wide receiver. First-round pick in 99 was Javon Kerr, starting outside linebacker or starting defensive end. Like, you need those guys. There was a point in time where the Titans had a 3-year period of going Javon Curse, Keith Bullock, and Albert Hainsworth all in the second half of the first round of the draft. So to sit there and say that, picks, I know some people operate like that. Coaches, Bill O'Brien operated like that in Texas, in Houston. Look how that worked out for him. And look how that ended out for the Texans. Because they fired O'Brien, but now the third overall pick in this year's draft, which was worth 3 first-rounders to San Francisco, that pick went to Miami. I hope you enjoy your left tackle. 615-737-1025. What else do we have in there, Caroline?
One texter texted in and said, my offer to Atlanta, nothing, nada. Go get a kicker, and Zach Ertz. Do not cripple the Titans the next 3 years in salary cap.
What I do wonder, and you'd have to look around the entire league to do this, because you just don't know who is technically available in a trade. And I do wonder if the Atlanta and Tennessee chats about Julio really have more to do with the possibility of the Titans really inquiring about Hayden Hurst. But I do wonder what tight ends are out there that the Titans could acquire, because everybody seems now to have their heart set on Zach Ertz. Mm-hmm. And I would just caution people that, hey, you need to have more options than just Zach Ertz, because what if there's another team that really likes Zach Ertz and they're willing to take on that full salary on June 1st, and the Titans aren't willing to take on that full salary? If you put all your eggs into the Zach Ertz basket, now you're kind of stuck with, again, who's going to be your tight end? So I do wonder who else is out there at tight end. But I would agree. I think they need to save money for kicker. I don't mind trying out the Ohio State kid, the non-drafted free agent out of Ohio State, saying, all right, go get him. I don't have a problem with that. But I need to have a cushion in there that if it's like last year where Floyd went to one training camp practice and said, get those kickers out of here, that you can turn around and re-sign Steven Gostkowski. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Plus, what is the latest on the Julio sweepstakes? We'll get to that coming up next. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. There's no crazy offers you got to have with those guys, because they will take great care of you. They've got the great offers for you. And I know this because I use Hiller myself. Summer weather is here, and this is the time of year when your AC systems are working overtime. Trust me, I know that. If your unit is nearing the end of its lifespan or starting to have trouble keeping your house cool enough, now is the time to replace it. My friends at Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical are offering special financing on HVAC systems this summer. Thus, you get a new system installed and you pay 0 interest for 60 months. Don't wait until you're uncomfortable, and certainly don't wait until you're miserable. Go ahead and ensure that you're ready for peak temperatures. Visit happyhiller.com for all of the details. As always, Happy You'll Be Here. The service is free. And again, I can back that up because I've used Hiller at my homes for the last 3 years. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, proud supporters of the Vols and the Preds. Hiller, call the Happy Face Truck today.
Dan Graziano, Julio Jones.
Yeah.
How soon should we be expecting a move?
I think it could be pretty soon, right? We have to wait till after June 1st in order for them to get the salary cap relief they need. So after close of business today. So theoretically, it could be tonight, tomorrow. I think at some point this week, it's possible Julio Jones could be on the move. Now, it's been a tricky situation to report because you hear a lot of different teams and you hear a lot of different moving parts. They're asking for a first-round pick and for whoever takes him on to take on the whole $15.3 million salary. The odds of them getting both of those things, I think, are slim. So maybe they come down to a second-round pick. Maybe they pick up part of the salary, although I don't think they can do much. And in terms of teams, you hear a lot of teams. The two most consistent I've heard have been the Rams and Patriots, a little bit of Tennessee. And then you hear there are other teams like Seattle, San Francisco that I think kind of feel like they wish they could do it, but in the end, they probably can't get there in terms of what it'll take. So we could have some answers on this pretty soon.
There you go, Dan Graziano saying he's hearing the Rams, he's hearing the Patriots, he's hearing a little Tennessee, and then Seattle, San Francisco, they want there, but they can't get in there, so forget about them. And again, I told you all, I think it's going to be one of these teams like Denver. It's going to be one of these teams like Carolina. It's going to be one of these teams that feels like they've got to make a splash. They don't totally make a lot of sense on paper. Julio probably doesn't want to go there, but ultimately for Atlanta to get somebody to take most of the money, that's probably what's going to happen. I do wonder this, though. Graziano started that clip off by talking about Atlanta wants a first-round pick and Atlanta wants someone to take all the money. And that's great. But if I put my house on the market, I would love for somebody to pay me $2 million. I get these unsolicited text messages. I don't know if you guys get these or not. I get these text messages that say, hey, Jared, would you be interested in selling your home? I'm Lisa with such and such, and I've got a great offer for you on your home. Would you be interested in selling? And then it puts out my address. And I'm sure it's some automated bot or something like that, but I'm sure somebody has to be dumb enough to text back yes. And I bet if you text back yes, you immediately get a call from somebody who's willing to give you a cash offer right then and there. Every time I get one of those text messages, which is literally like once every 6 weeks, maybe more frequent than that.
Very annoying.
I send back $5 million. You want my house? $5 million. I like my house. I feel like you like my house, right?
I like your house. It's very nice.
If somebody offered me $5 million and I didn't take it, what would you say to me?
You're an idiot.
Okay. So I'm willing to $5 million. Okay. But Atlanta wants to get rid of Julio.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Atlanta is putting it just like a house in the market, and they're telling you this is what our asking price is.
Well, yeah, and of course the Falcons are saying we want a first rounder
Sure.
and someone to absorb his entire salary. Of course they are.
But
why wouldn't they?
I wonder if we go a couple more days without any movement on Julio, if that tells us that no team in the league is willing to do what Atlanta really wants. You know, one of the reasons the Texans released J.J. Watt, and I think this was to avoid what's going on with Julio right now with Atlanta, was the Texans at the time, this was pre-sexual harassment lawsuits to Deshaun Watson, they were dealing with an identity crisis of how much people were railing on their organization and how they had kowtowed to Jack Esterby and how they had isolated Deshaun Watson and had agitated Deshaun Watson, and he wanted out. So the star player of the team is mad at the team, and it's a bad look for the team. The other star player was traded last year for a bag of peanuts. And the other star player was not worth the money that he was owed, and there probably wasn't going to be a taker that wasn't going to be willing to ask the Texans to take a little bit money in return. So by releasing J.J. Watt, they secured themselves of the financial liability that they had with his big contract, like the $17+ million, and they didn't escalate thoughts around the league that the Texans were disrespectful or that the Texans were bad to players or that the Texans mistreated their players, because once you get that going, it's really hard to get people to want to join your program, and they were already dealing with it with Deshaun. With Atlanta, there is a trade factor here of Julio. Somebody was dumb enough on JJ to give him way too much money. J.J. Watt got way too much money from Arizona, but it was Arizona. Nobody considers them to be a competitor in the NFC. Nobody even thinks that they're good enough to compete at the top of the NFC West. But JJ got his money. I wonder with this, is Atlanta going to have to not only lower their asking price on what they really want in return for Julio Jones, because we know it's not a first-round pick and players and you take the money. We know it's not that. But is Atlanta going to have to lower it so much so because nobody wants to talk when it comes to a first-round pick and nobody wants to talk when it comes to the money? Arizona was fine with paying the money for J.J. Watt. Do you think Arizona would have traded a first-round pick and paid J.J. the money? I kind of doubt that. I wonder if Atlanta finds themselves in that scenario. And if there's not movement on Julio over the next couple of days, it will tell me that Atlanta is not even getting close to what they want. And I do think that that is worth continuing to monitor. So if tonight, if Adam Schefter fires off a tweet and he says, sources are telling us that Julio Jones is being traded by Atlanta in exchange for a 2022 third, and the Carolina Panthers are taking on the full salary, then we'll know that that was the best offer by far they could have found. If the days go by and we hear the same things on Julio that we've heard for the last couple of weeks, which is he wants out, Atlanta wants you to pay the money, Atlanta wants a high pick in return, then that tells me they're getting no traction.
I also think it was very strategic that they planned out, or they painted it very clear. We would like a first round pick and an absorption of the entire salary. But they also said, that's what we want, but we'll also accept a second rounder, a third rounder, partial salary, whatever it may be. So they made it very clear this is what we want. But to not scare potential partners away, this is what we will also take.
The one thing I would say on the JJ front, Diana Rossini did report last week that the Falcons have a first-round pick on the table. And I remember with JJ, I think Diana Rossini reported he's got about $15 million a year offer somewhere. And I'm like, that is just bullcrap. Like, I just didn't believe that. And I will give credit where credit is due because JJ did get the money. Now, I was stunned when I saw JJ to Arizona because I thought JJ wanted to win a Super Bowl. So I had a hard time with that. But, yes, I do think there's probably something there. Let's get to your reaction. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. And, again, we are getting very close, supposedly, to the J.J. Watt sweepstakes deadline. J.J. Watt. Julio Jones sweepstakes deadline, or what we would assume that would be. So we'll get to your phones next. 615-737-1025, Stillman Company. We're delivered by TriStar Moving right here on ESPN 1025 The Game. I need to tell everybody out there, though, right now about how important ESPN 1025 The Game and T-Mobile partnering up to give you a chance to experience a Nashville SC game this season is. Tune in every Monday to Darren, Donick, and Chase for the keyword to text in to win. Good luck from 1025 The Game, T-Mobile, and our friends at Nashville SC. Stillman & Company is delivered by TriStar Moving. It's ESPN 1025 The Game.
The Tennessee Titans, they need Julio Jones more than anyone else. They took a big chance this offseason letting Corey Davis walk. Jonnu Smith is gone, and they haven't really replaced him. They bring in Josh Reynolds. He's okay. He's a number 3. He's a number 4. They have nobody to complement A.J. Brown. Anthony Ferkser at tight end. He's okay. He's a good complementary tight end, but is a massive risk right now if the Titans go into the season with this group of playmakers. It's A.J. Brown, 90-plus receiver, unstoppable, short, intermediate, deep. He could do it all, but Julio Jones is the guy. If it's Julio Jones and A.J. Brown, immediately, just ranking groups of pass catchers, the Titans go from one of the worst in the league to at least top 10, maybe even top 5. The Titans need Julio Jones more than anyone else, and then it's Julio, it's A.J. Brown, and then their receiving core is unstoppable.
There you go. That was Pro Football Focus. Who was that, Sam?
That was Steve Palazzolo.
Steve Palazzolo, Pro Football Focus. The Titans need Julio Jones, says Pro Football Focus. Let me state for the record, this is not John Madden football. And the more that Pro Football Focus becomes a factor and people actually thinking they know what they're talking about, the more and closer we get to this literally trying to be John Madden football. I mean, Julio's a 90-plus receiver. Is this Madden football? Is it 93 overall? Josh Reynolds, he's okay. He's a 3. He's a 4. First of all, he's very clearly a 3. He is very clearly not a 4. Josh Reynolds took $1.75 million in order to get the opportunity that Corey Davis was gifted year after year because Davis was the 5th overall pick. And Reynolds said, okay, I feel like I did a good job filling in for Cooper Kupp the year he got hurt in 2018. But when I'm on the Rams, there's always a Robert Woods ahead of me. There's always a Cooper Kupp ahead of me. There's always a Brandon Cooks ahead of me. There's always somebody ahead of me, and I don't get on the field much. The Titans are taking a risk to see if Josh Reynolds on a 1-year, $1.75 million contract is good enough to be a number 2. Reynolds is taking a risk by taking less money, no financial security, to go prove that he can be a number 2. He's earned that possibility. The idea and the problem I have with Pro Football Focus is that they don't really know. They pretend to be this, guru analysis, in-depth stats, grading. They know it all. Pro Football Focus is right. I'll never forget how much Floyd detested Pro Football Focus and how 3 or 4 years ago, Bill Belichick was asked about grades that websites would give teams, and Belichick just railed and said he wasn't a smart enough football coach for all of that. That tells you all you need to know about this. Are the Titans the most desperate team in the league for Julio Jones? Probably not. Do the Titans have issues to address at pass catching positions? Yes. But starting tight end, that's a bigger one than number 2 receiver on a team that runs the ball. Let's go to your phone. 615-737-1025. Joe is up next here. Our phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com on Julio Jones. Go ahead, Joe.
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking my call, man. Short answer, I'm going to say if I'm the Titans, I pass. I pass on Julio. It's an attractive name. It's great and all. I got to give up too much for him. And he's kind of at the end of his, career a little bit. I mean, he might got a few more years left in the tank, but are we going back to the DeMarco Murray age? I mean, DeMarco Murray was good, but just for 2 years. So what is the end game for the Titans? The end game's to win the Super Bowl. Are they equipped to do that right now? No. They just let go Corey Davis and Jonnu Smith, and I wouldn't have let them go if it was me. I wouldn't have. I'd at least try to keep at least Jonnu Smith or somebody up there other than A.J. Brown to catch the ball, and I get it. We need an extra set of hands. I understand. But I think we addressed that partly in the draft, maybe, possibly. We'll have to find out when they start playing the ball. But we just cannot do what we did last year and bet the farm on the defense versus the offense and then just lose our rear off in the regular season. We can't do that again, guys. I appreciate taking my call, brother.
Yep, thank you. I'm not totally sure I follow with the call because the idea was the team's not good enough, but don't get Julio, and they haven't replaced Davis and Jonnu Smith, but don't get Julio, and don't spend all the resources on defense, but don't get Julio. So I agree with the idea of don't get Julio, but I don't agree with how he got there for me. I struggle with how to get from what he said to kind of the end thesis there. Let me say this. I think the Titans are not done. I do think tight end is legitimate here, that they will go after and get a tight end. Jeremy Fowler today reported several teams are interested in Zach Ertz and that the Eagles are not going to just cut him. So they want something good in return. So now the Eagles are trying to play the same game with Zach Ertz that the Falcons are playing with Julio Jones. And I wonder, are they involved in that? Was the initial call to Atlanta about Julio Jones really about Hayden Hurst, their tight end? I don't think the Titans are done. So when the caller says, they let Corey Davis go, they let Jonnu Smith go, what are they doing? I think there is another move to be made. When they didn't go tight end in this draft, I knew, okay, there's another move to be made here. That being said, last year, the Titans didn't bet the farm on anything. They didn't bet the farm on defense. They took a risk on Clowney, but it wasn't the farm because you could afford for Clowney to not work out. You no longer have that cushion this year. And again, with Clowney, it was $12 million or $12.5 million straight up. There was no draft pick that was tied to Clowney when it came to acquiring him. Julio, it doesn't feel that way. Zach Ertz, it doesn't feel that way. So these teams are holding out for what they think is best, for what they want. And I'm just telling you, I just don't see it's not the Titans' MO. The one thing I do disagree with the caller about was the idea of, are we going back to the DeMarco Murray days? If the Titans could work out a similar trade on Julio Jones that they worked out with DeMarco Murray, which was DeMarco redoes his deal to put the Titans in a favorable position where they paid DeMarco for 2 years and then they cut him and they didn't owe him a single dollar, and they get the value of the trade like they did with Philadelphia when they swapped picks in the 4th round, which means, okay, instead of picking with the 6th pick in the 4th round, I'm now picking with the 20th pick in the 4th round. If they could do that for Julio, they would. Atlanta is praying that that's not the best they can do here. What's in the text line?
Scott texted in and said the Titans only have maybe a 2-year window to hopefully win a Super Bowl. Henry and Tannehill, only a couple good years left. They need to restructure Tannehill's contract and Lawan's contract to get the money they need. Then get Jones and a tight end. Time is running out on this team. The time to get him is now before our window closes.
Okay, there is a lot to that text. And I don't agree with doing this, but I understand it if they were to do this. If you redid Tannehill and you redid Lawan completely, you'd have to blow it up in 2023, probably still be bad in 2024 when the cap explodes. But you'd have to blow it up after that. And there would be no way around. Like, you would have to know you're going to suck. You would have to say, okay, we think Derrick Henry is the best player on the team. We think there are 2 more good years left in Derrick Henry. We think Ryan Tannehill is in his mid-30s. By the time he crosses that threshold and is past his mid-30s, we don't expect him to be a starting quarterback in the NFL anymore. Same with Kevin Byard, same with Taylor Lewan, same with the core group of players on this team. Then you could do it. Now, again, I wouldn't do it, but if the Titans were to take that approach and say, okay, 2 more years for this group, let's go all in, let's see, I understand. What I have to prepare people for, though, and we talked about this before the show today, and that is kind of the impulsive nature of fans wanting everything right now. It's easy for a fan today to say, mortgage the future, let's be bad in a couple of years. But when that day comes, how are fans going to feel when it's like, yeah, we're going to suck for the next couple of years? And I will give you this. The Predators, everybody got excited when they traded Sam Girard for Kyle Turris. And everybody got excited when they traded away P.K. Subban and they signed Matt Duchene. And everybody got excited when they signed Victor Arvidsson to that long contract and they signed Joe Hansen to that long contract. And I remember when they made the trade for Kyle Turris, and I remember Braden Gall hosting the morning show at the time going, they're going for it. And we ran a promo that said, they're going for it. And they traded a first-round pick for Ryan Hartman, who stinks. And everybody said, they're going for it. And I was the only one that threw my hands up at third base saying, whoa, stop. First-round pick for a guy who's not good. Well, they're going for it, Jared. How do you feel now? They went for it. They didn't win the cup. They didn't win the Cup in 17. They didn't win the Cup in 18. They got bounced in the first round in 19. They're barely a playoff team now. They were barely a playoff team last year. They fired the coach to try to fix all the good players that weren't playing well. That hasn't really panned out. How do you feel now? Because that's what's going to happen with the Titans. If they make these kind of moves, if you say, okay, let's restructure Tannehill, let's restructure Lawan, let's restructure everybody, and let's put it together and let's just roll with it. Okay. But then in 3 years, when it's got to be blown up, Vrabel's probably losing his job. Robinson's probably losing his job. You guys didn't win your Super Bowl. You're going to be upset about it. And I don't think that the Titans should put themselves in that position. I think you should hope that you can draft players that over time allows you to kind of transition from one area of competitiveness to another. That when it's time for Derrick Henry to go, that there's a plan in place. That when it's time for Tannehill to go, that there's a plan in place, as opposed to let's load up for the next 2 years, and if it doesn't work, then let's endure 5 years of stinking. That I struggle with. 615-737-1025. Hold that thought. We'll get back to your reaction on all of this. Trevor Maddich will join us in the next hour. We'll get Trevor's thoughts on Julio Jones and the Titans as well. Stillman Company, we're delivered by TriStar Moving. It's ESPN 1025 The Game, and we're streaming on the Game Nashville app. Stillman Company is delivered by TriStar Moving, ESPN 102.5 The Game. Trevor Maddich in 30 minutes. We'll get his thoughts on the Titans and Julio Jones. Caroline Fenton is here. Ian is here. So now we've gotten into the point where, like, everybody wants different things. I've always said this about how people vote, right? It's like you think that a vote for the guy you don't like is a vote for blank. But that's not necessarily why somebody is voting for that. Like, people have different reasons. They may not like the guy they voted for. They may be voting against the other guy. They may not like the guy that they voted for, but there is a specific policy that affects their lives that matters to them more than others. And it's like sometimes people have a hard time realizing why somebody would vote a certain way. And I struggle with that too. I have friends that are like humongously interested in one thing, and then they vote a way that is totally against that, but they vote for different reasons for why they do vote. So fans, as far as the Titans are concerned, with all of this Julio Jones talk, fans, I think, kind of have different interests. Some fans want to do what is safe, which is what I want to do, which is if I get Julio on my terms, I'm cool with it. Other fans just want to sell the house and just let it ride and go for it and try to win your Super Bowl and go get after it. And I'm kind of torn on how people actually feel about that, because it's always fun on the front end to say we're going for it. And then on the back end, when you don't get it, it's kind of hard to put the pieces back together. We just went over the Predators and them going for it and how it didn't work. And now people are upset. They're mad at the general manager. They've already fired the coach. They got contracts on their hands they can't move. If they were to move it, then it would take everybody that called the radio show around the trade deadline said they need to get rid of Johansson and they need to get rid of Duchesne. Well, guess what? No one wants those guys. Ekholm? Oh, no, don't trade him. Well, that's what you got to trade.
Forsberg?
Do you know why Atlanta's in the mess they're in now? Because they went for it. Because Atlanta got to the Super Bowl in 2016. Dan Quinn is their coach. They had a good roster. They were literally one play multiple times away from winning the Super Bowl. And you get so addicted when you are that close. You get so addicted to the idea of winning a championship that you consistently put off everything until push comes to shove. Now, sometimes it works out. A year later, the Philadelphia Eagles put all their chips in that basket, and they won their Super Bowl. The Seattle Seahawks were this close a second time to winning a Super Bowl, and they were going for it. So I get it. I hear you. But most of the time it doesn't work. Thomas Dimitroff, the Atlanta general manager that put them in the cap situation they're in now, he's not a dummy. He's the same guy that put Matt Ryan in as quarterback. He's the same guy that hired Kyle Shanahan to be offensive coordinator after Kyle had gotten fired in Washington with his dad. He was general manager for over a decade in Atlanta. He didn't forget how to manage the cap. He went for it because he knew that if he didn't go for it and they didn't win, that he'd be fired. And now he is fired. And now Atlanta has a humongous mess on their hands. It's easy for people now to sit there and say that they're okay with it. Just like last year, it was easy for people to say they were okay with Clowney. Hey, they got the cap space, sign Clowney. There's no bigger ramifications other than giving Clowney the money. It's fine. Ian, if we've got it, Floyd said last year he was talking about the decision to sign Clowney. And I've referenced this clip a lot because this is how contracts in the NFL actually work. At 5 o'clock today, a lot of people on Twitter got mad at me because I told them that a simple Tannehill restructure is not going to allow you to afford Julio Jones. And oh my God, did Twitter get mad at me. And at 5 o'clock, I will explain to you about how that's not feasible. But there are always secondary moves for every move you make. There's always a secondary move that's being discussed. And Floyd told you last year with the Clowney move that if you signed him, it would cost you somebody this year. Last year, the element was, we got the money in cap space. Why don't we just sign Clowney? And Floyd told you, why not? Here's what he said.
This is what we have to keep in mind with all this. What's more important to you? Would it be more important to you to have Clowney for 1 year or to have Jonnu for 5 years? Who are the other guys whose contracts are up? Brown, the linebacker, would you rather have him for 4 or 5 years? Would you? Because those are the kinds of decisions John is having to make, which is we know what the cap's going to be next year. So we know there's a decrease there. So not only are you getting money taken away, but you are not getting the raise in your allowance that you thought you were going to get. So it's like a double whammy for you. So they're going to deal with maybe $30, $40, $50 million less than they thought they were going to have. And so you can imagine what that does to your salary. So all of this money that and the money you save, you can roll over. So you have to look at next year, particularly next year, and maybe even the year after, but for sure next year, and say, okay, how am I? Imagine if you spend the money that you could have saved on Clowney, and then next year you can't sign Brown, you can't sign Jonnu, you can't sign all of these other players. In the long run, your team is worse.
What happened? They signed Clowney, $12.5 million. The franchise tag for Jonnu Smith was $10 million. Got a $50 million offer somewhere else. Who's the tight end for the Titans? That was last year when they had the cap space. This is this year where they don't have the cap space. The ceiling for next season is $208 million on the cap. And you're saying, go do it. And that's fine. Just like Floyd said, what they were discussing last year was, okay, if we do this, it may cost us Jonnu Smith for the next 5 years. Okay, it did. What I'm telling you is, if you do this, if you really, truly go for it, it will cost you 3 years down the road, 4 years down the road, maybe even 5 years down the road. You willing to do that? I am not, because I don't think this team is good enough. I don't think this Titan team is good enough right now to put one player on it, go to Arrowhead, and beat the Chiefs. Maybe you do. I don't. It wasn't the way last year when everybody told me that's what Clowney was going to be. So that's the position they're in. And I think sometimes fans struggle with seeing the forest from the trees because they just want that right now, go compete for the Super Bowl today, and they can talk themselves into it. And I'm not sure Julio put you there, and I know how much it screws your cap up down the road. The Minnesota Vikings, I think, are an example of this. And this is of what not to be. The Minnesota Vikings got to the NFC title game with Case Keenum as their starting quarterback. We know Case Keenum is not a good quarterback. So they get there with a great defense, good offensive skill players like Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen, and all of a sudden they are rolling along. Kyle Rudolph, the tight end, Dalvin Cook at running back. We just need a quarterback. Enter Kirk Cousins. Now, Kirk wasn't good enough for Washington to pay, but Minnesota needed him, and Cousins paid him. An outrageous 3-year fully guaranteed contract. They had no leverage in releasing Cousins. And then when they were up against the cap and they had no choice but to extend Cousins to spread out money, that's what they had to do. Sign of hands to who thinks Minnesota can compete. Sign of hands to who thinks Minnesota can go to the Super Bowl with Kirk Cousins. But just know that 3 years ago, there were a lot of people that thought they were a Kirk Cousins away. That's how I feel about the Titans. And the idea of mortgaging it for Julio is just not there.
If you were guaranteed a Super Bowl, if the Titans were going to win a Super Bowl in 2021, if they signed Julio Jones, they're just going to be really bad for 5 to 10 years after. Would you do it? That's unrealistic, but just picking your brain.
It's completely unrealistic. Probably, I'd say yes, just because I look at the numbers of it. Like, this is a franchise that in 60-plus years of existence hasn't won the Super Bowl. They got really close one time. Like, it's hard to win the Super Bowl. So if you gave me one, I mean, think about it. Aaron Rodgers has one. Drew Brees has one. Russell Wilson has one. Patrick Mahomes has one. Like, the idea of turning yourself into the Patriots is not very feasible. In fact, I have a hard time seeing the Patriots turn themselves back into the Patriots. So, yes, would I take one to be bad for the next 5 years? Yes, I would. That being said, there's no guarantee that you win the Super Bowl.
Right.
That's where I struggle, is that lack of people think that if you make that move, you could, in fact, win that Super Bowl. And I'm like, it doesn't work that way. Or at least I don't think it works that way. Let's get to your phones on this next. 615-737-1025. We're live from the Wholesaling Studio, powered by RumbleOn.com here on Stillman Company, as we are delivered by TriStar Moving. It should be noted that Trevor Match will join us in a little bit. Go to theGameNashville.com to check out Nashville's best deals. This week, purchase a $30 Boomboss Craft Pizza and Tap House gift card for only $15. Try their award-winning pizza plus 20 local beers and drafts at all locations. It's the place to go to bring the family or to come for pizza, beer, and sports. 4 Middle Tennessee locations, Bellevue, Murfreesboro, Spring Hill, and East Nashville, which has a humongous video wall. Get yours now at theGameNashville.com. Stillman & Company, we are delivered by TriStar Moving. It's ESPN 1025 The Game.
I don't think it would behoove them to attempt to pull off a trade to send him a place where he wouldn't want to go. So, and that's because the other team is going to pick up on that, right? So, and Tennessee is a place I believe he would want to go. It makes sense for a lot of reasons. they are a franchise that obviously has been a consistently winning team over the last 3, 4, 5 years. They won, 11 games last year. They're sort of at that point now that you could say, add a Julio Jones, add that one-star player who could get us over the top and we could compete for a Super Bowl. So in that sense, they are really a perfect fit. They have, a good young receiver. Julio Jones could come in and help mentor that receiver and their receiving core in general, much like he mentored Calvin Ridley here in Atlanta. It's a similar climate. He wouldn't have to freeze his butt off in the middle of winter if he went to Baltimore, New England. It just keeps him close to. It keeps him in the South, right? He played at Alabama, and so I think in many ways it would be desirable for Julio to go to Tennessee.
That was Jeff Schultz, Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Well, long time there. I'm sorry, Athletic now. He's with the AJC for a long time. It's hard. I'm getting old, I guess. Those old people that are like, oh, yeah, he used to be with that. No,
Back in my day, this is who we wrote for.
I apologize to Jeff, the Athletic, saying that Julio, it would be bad to send Julio somewhere he doesn't want to go. I don't know how you trade a $15 million player, get a high pick in return, send him to a team that he wants to go to, and have that team want to sell the farm in order to get him.
It's just getting to be a lot.
Somebody's going to be unhappy here.
Yes.
Somebody is
And I don't
going to
think
be
the
unhappy.
Falcons want to be unhappy.
And then there's Julio. And I don't think the team that trades for Julio wants to do all of that and end up unhappy with an unhappy Julio. So it's a tough place to be in. Let's go to your phones. Driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Trevor Maddich, ESPN football analyst in 10 minutes. We'll get Trevor's thoughts. Would he do it? Does he think Julio's going to be worth all of that? But let's go to your phones. The text line, Caroline Fenton's on it. What do we have?
Ron texted in and said it's all fine and it's all worth it if you win a Super Bowl, but we don't have time with Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill. So what would you do knowing the Titans need a tight end and also want Julio?
So I wouldn't add Julio. I mean, I think there is the where you have to pick element here. You can't have it all. And the cap in the NFL is flexible, but only to a point. And I go back to the old days of the Titans. I keep looking at this. I think people who don't learn from history are always bound to repeat it. The Chicago Blackhawks nickel and dimed their way to getting under the salary cap for about a solid 6-year period. And it worked because they won 3 Stanley Cups. But they knew that once they signed Taves and Kane to those humongous deals, that eventually the walls were going to cave in. Either you have to let the player go, or you have to sign him to a big contract, and then everybody else around him has to go. And since then, Chicago has not been very good at hockey. But it's okay because they won the 3 Cups. When Floyd was general manager of the Titans, he went in there with the same approach, which was, we were 1 yard short of the Super Bowl. We know this core with McNair and George and Brad Hopkins and Javon Curse and Keith Bullock and Blaine Bishop and Samari Roll and Derek Mason and Frank Wycheck. And we know this group is good enough to compete. What do we have to do to keep it together? They had the best record in football the next year. Then they had to make cuts. Then they had an injury-plagued 7-9 season. They were in the AFC title game, and they were 12-4, and they lost at the buzzer to the Patriots in Foxborough in the playoffs. In a 5-year period, that is as darn close to winning the Super Bowl as you can get, right? 1 yard short, best record in the league, losing to the eventual champs, AFC championship game, losing to the Patriots. Like, other than that one bad year in there, that is the closest you can possibly get without winning it. And yet, I still have people on Twitter that say, Floyd Reese just ruined the cap. He knew what he was doing. He knew why he did it. All the people that say, hey, we've only got a couple of years left with Henry and Tannehill, let's go for it. He did it. Then it didn't work. They got as close as possible. Did not win the Super Bowl. And then people were like, why is the team in cap jail? Why are they so? By the way, they were in cap jail in 2004 and 2005. Eddie George had to go. Samari Roll had to go. Derek Mason had to go. Steve McNair had to go. Benji Olsen. They all had to go. Then, when they got out from cap jail, they signed Kevin Mawai, David Thornton, Nick Harper, and David Givens. Now, David Givens never worked out, but the other 3 were important. The Titans then, in 07 and 08, still had Floyd's players. Floyd's been fired at this point. made it to the playoffs. Best record in the league in 2008. But then when you have a bad general manager after that, Mike Reinfeldt, can't draft. Bad. John Robinson gets hired, winning season since. We need to take from the history lesson here, which is if you're willing to go for this, and this is where sometimes I think things should be communicated on the front end. And maybe it doesn't matter to fans, but if you're going to go for it the way a lot of people are suggesting to go for it, if you're going to do that, then just know that being bad at the bottom of the league, expensive contracts that you cut and it's painful when you do it, rebuilding like Jacksonville last year, it's going to happen to you if you push all your chips into the center. Jacksonville did it. They pushed all their chips into the center after they got to the AFC Championship game, and it didn't work. And last year, what happened? They traded A.J. Boye. They traded Calais Campbell. They had a terrible team with Gardner Minshew at quarterback. They were the worst team in the NFL. That's what happens. What else we got?
One texter asks if the Titans would be able to pay for an A.J. Brown extension deal in the future if they acquired Julio.
So, again, I mean, I think it's weird how this will all line up because A.J.'s last year, I believe, will be next year. So this was his second year this past year, his first year, so this will be his third year, his fourth year. If A.J. has another season like A.J. had this past season or his rookie season, A.J. is going to want a new contract before the start of next season. In fact, I'm a little surprised A.J. doesn't want a new contract right now, and that could make things an issue. Remember when Julio Jones signed a new contract and then a year later didn't like it and held out? I worry that A.J. was going to hold out this year. And somebody said, A.J.'s not going to hold out. And it looks like he's not. But A.J. will want a new contract next year, and he will not play on that fourth year of his deal. So he'll want a new contract. That new contract would start in 2023. You'd give him a lot of money up front in 2022, but that new contract would start in 2023. You're still on the hook for Julio money for those 2 years, but maybe not the third year. So in theory, they may not have much to do with each other, but we've also talked about how important rollover cap is, and I believe in rollover cap. And with this, you're going to have to get rid of players, and you're certainly going to have no rollover cap. I mean, the truth is, right now the Titans, as constructed, I think I feel okay about as a football team without their tight end and without their kicker. They need a tight end, they need a kicker, okay? So you're going to have to create a little bit of money somewhere to do those two things, and I'm sure they will, which you can reasonably restructure Tannehill to save $6 or $8 million on the cap this year, and it not just absolutely tear you to shreds like it would if you fully restructured him and you had a $42 million cap hit next year at the position. I do not feel like if you were to really kick it on down for Julio, kick it on down, move it on down, you'd have no rollover cap over the next 2 years. Then A.J. would want his money. Then you're going to have to cut more players. And I just don't think – it's like all these people that want to talk about adding Julio and then Joe Rexrode. And I think the only way you can do it is if you trade Roger or if you cut Roger Saffold. You know, that is – and there's a long process of how to get there. But I think you have to cut Roger Saffold in order to make this work. And Joe Rexrode comes back and says, well, no, they could trade Janoris Jenkins and Josh Reynolds, and they could move that. So now I don't have a starting corner. And the receiver that I have pegged to play number 2, now I'm taking him out because I just traded for Julio. And I still have to create money. And that to me, that's too many steps. Julio's not worth that many steps. Atlanta's in the mess they're in now because they catered to give Julio what he wanted. And I think that that's kind of where you don't want to be. You don't want to have to react because of something you did. And I think that's how a Julio trade works. Trevor Maddich will join us next. We'll get his thoughts. Does he think they should do it? Plus, I don't know if anybody saw this. Tennessee baseball obviously had a pretty impressive year. 3rd overall national seed ahead of Vandy. Is that hope for Vol football fans? That Vol baseball has gotten their heads out of their rear ends?
I think that Tennessee fans will feel like it means something like, hey, look at fall baseball turning things around.
Sure.
It's our year. Because I think Tennessee football fans have been saying it's our year for about 23 years now. So I think it will give them hope, but I don't think it means anything for the football program.
Trevor Maddich joins us next. Stillman Company. It's ESPN 102.5 The Game. Stillman Company, delivered by TriStar Moving, ESPN 102.5 The Game. We are efforting ESPN's Trevor Maddich. We'll get his thoughts on if the Titans should acquire Julio Jones. Meanwhile, earlier today, Mike Tannenbaum brought up the interesting element of what he would do if he were general manager of the Atlanta Falcons, given the Julio situation. Here's what he said. This was Mike Tannenbaum earlier today on ESPN.
Mike Tannenbaum, you've always got answers for me here. If you're the general manager in Atlanta right now, tell me how this is playing out. What are you doing on the phones as you try to figure out how and when you're going to trade Julio Jones?
I'm taking the list of those teams that Dan just gave us, and I'm saying, I need your best offer by the end of the day today. And don't complain tomorrow that you would have done more when I trade him to Team X, because this is going to happen, and it's going to happen fast. And that's the only way I really can create a sense of urgency, and here's why. It's been so public that you simply can't tell another team, if we don't get the offer we like, he's going to come back and be a Falcon. That's off the table. So the best way to create a sense of urgency is, I need your final and best offer today.
And Caroline put together the offer: a 2020 second third, a 2023 fourth, and Atlanta eats $6 million in cap space. I got to believe Atlanta's going to get a better offer than that, though I wouldn't give a better offer than that. Let's go to your phones. Again, we're efforting Trevor Maddich. Let's go to your phones, which are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Caroline Fenton on the text line. What do we have?
Avery in Columbia texted in, I believe we might be discrediting the upgrades on defense quite a bit. Having an upgrade at all to the defense to go along with still having a high-powered offense with Julio, I believe moves the needle. I agree that we do have to take into consideration that the Titans defense should be taking a step forward this year, because I don't know how you could take a step back. However, if the Titans do sign Julio, there are still glaring needs on the offense. You still don't have tight end.
So I just don't think you can go into this without a tight end. Like, right. I think it's easy to sit there and say, production-wise, well, if Julio comes in, Jonnu Smith had 400-plus receiving yards last year. Well, if Julio comes in and he's going to have 800 receiving yards, and that's better than, and I keep going back to, who's on the field on 3rd and 4? On 1st and 10? If you want to run the ball with Derrick Henry, who's on the field? Is Anthony Firkser your tight? He's not a tight end. They don't trust him to block. Trevor Maddich joins us now, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Trev, I look at the Julio Jones thing. The fans, I think, want Julio Jones to the Titans. I struggle with giving up anything to get him, plus the big cap number in return. I struggle with seeing how this makes sense for the Titans. You are as unbiased as it comes to Julio Jones and as unbiased as it comes to the Titans. Do you think this is a risk worth taking when the Titans don't even have a starting tight end?
Jared, I love the possibility. If they get Julio Jones, even if it's for a first-round pick, preferably a second, I think it is great because of what he brings and where this team is right now. It would be a gargantuan increase in their offensive capability that would maximize the guys that they have that are starting to get a bit older and would maximize this championship window that they're in right now with Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill.
Oh, I so disagree. Well,
why? Why don't you like it?
Because in order to do it, I'd have to restructure Tannehill's deal. I'd probably have to restructure Taylor Lewan's deal, and I'd probably have to cut my starting left guard, Roger Saffold. And then I'm adding a number 2 wide receiver on a running team, and Julio's a number 2 for the Titans because AJ's the number 1. I'm adding a number 2 wide receiver on a running team that doesn't even have a starting tight end. So now I'm getting rid of my starting left guard, and I'm not filling my starting tight end. So I have backups at both positions where I already have a backup at right tackle, and I want Derrick Henry to run it for 2,000 yards. That I struggle with.
I couldn't disagree more, Jared. I don't think, first of all, they have to get rid of Saffold. I think they would need to restructure his contract, probably need to restructure Taylor Lewan's contract. Tannehill would be easy. I mean, all they would have to do is convert this year's salary to signing bonus and push it off into future years. But we expect the salary cap to go up a lot as Amazon is now getting involved with the Thursday night NFL package. And, we're looking at the potential for more salary cap relief just because of the increase there. And so I don't think financially it will be that big of a deal. If I'm Saffold or Lewan or Tannehill, I am in there restructuring my contract, not taking less money, but restructuring it right now with bells on to try to get Julio Jones in there. Because when you look at Derrick Henry, for example, he's pushing 30. And a guy that runs like he does, and he's still running at the top of his game. But that kind of a running back tends to fade very quickly when he hits the wall. Tannehill is in his 30s now. He'll be 33, I think, during the season, this upcoming season. And so he doesn't have a whole lot of years left necessarily, at least that you can count on. By bringing in Julio Jones to stack up alongside A.J. Brown on the other side, goodness gracious, what that would do to defensive coordinators trying to game plan for this offense. I mean, Brown can get deep. Jones can get deep. You've got to keep two safeties back there, or Tannehill will have two options running down each sideline. One of them's going to be in man coverage. And if you do keep two safeties deep, if you only have one safety deep, if you do keep two safeties deep, then how are you going to stack the box against Derrick Henry? I mean, to me, this is a no-brainer for the next couple of years to absolutely maximize the championship window that the combination of Tannehill and Henry have put you in. Now, where am I wrong?
Do you think Julio puts them in that championship window? Do you think they can go to Arrowhead and beat the Chiefs with Julio Jones on their team?
Oh, do you think they can go beat him without Julio Jones?
No, but I don't think they can beat him with Julio Jones.
Yeah, I think they've got a better chance, especially because look at what happens to the Titans when they're trailing late in games, in the second half, especially the fourth quarter. Derrick Henry is far less effective because teams will come up and jam the run, and there's only one deep threat at receiver, and really losing Corey Davis, losing him hurts because he was actually very effective last year in the regular season, and that kind of hurts, and still this is not a comeback team. And so by having Julio Jones there, it changes the dynamic of this team when they fall behind. They're not just reliant on plan A, which is run the ball, play action, pass. Now they can also plan B, pocket, go deep with two guys, and still gouge you up front and get big yards if you try to keep the safeties deep. So, and also when you look at the defense, Jared, this is one place that I think is important. This defense may end up being much improved. It may. Really, the whole thing will depend on Caleb Farley, the first-round draft choice corner, staying healthy and playing at a championship level. But if he's able to do that, then this defense will be improved. But you got to figure also that this defense will perform better with the offense being ahead. And they have a much better chance of scoring a lot more points with Julio Jones. I'm not worried about the cap at all. I think that's something that they can manage. I think of Tampa Bay and Tom Brady, and I think that's what the Titans need to be thinking like. Tampa Bay right now is thinking, okay, we've got Tom Brady, we've got receivers, we are going to maximize our capability to win Super Bowls right now, and the future we'll deal with when we get there. Then look at the opposite of that, Green Bay, where they drafted a quarterback in the first round, moved up to get him a couple of years ago to replace their Hall of Famer, Aaron Rodgers, and all that did was make Aaron Rodgers mad at him and took away one potential weapon for Rodgers because now they're working on 4 years down the road. I think the Titans need to focus on right now because they are so good at what they do well. If they had an extra component, which Julio Jones will, look out.
Well, here's where I'm going to disagree. Trevor Maddich, our guest, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics. It's easy to say, be like Tampa Bay. Think of the right now. Right now, they just won the Super Bowl. What about Minnesota a couple years ago? Minnesota thought they had all the pieces in place to compete for a Super Bowl. They got to the NFC title game with Case Keenum as their starting quarterback, and they felt like they were a quarterback away. And they gave the farm to Kirk Cousins, a fully guaranteed contract. And that guaranteed contract had such cap ramifications that they had to extend him last year after that fully guaranteed contract so that they could get a little bit of cap relief. They thought they were right there on the cusp. Great defense, Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs, Kyle Rudolph, Dalvin Cook. They thought they were there. And now I look at Minnesota, and I see them as a middle of the road franchise that has no hope of actually competing until they get rid of Cousins, and they can't. And that's what doing a move like this would worry me. So it's easy to look at Tampa Bay, Trev, but I worry about becoming Minnesota with this kind of move.
Yes, but do you see the Titans as a middle-of-the-road AFC franchise?
I see it if Ryan Tannehill can't get any better than he has been. And if Ryan Tannehill can't get any better than he has been, and I acquire Julio Jones, now I've restructured his contract, and I am tied to Ryan Tannehill for the next 3 or 4 years. Whereas right now, I'm only tied to Tannehill for this year and next year. And that's all I'm tied to him for. If I redo the deal with a full restructure to get Julio with no voidable years and I just converted all to bonus, I'm looking at a $42 million cap hit in 2022 at the quarterback position. That is what the Vikings have done to put them in that Kirk Cousins scenario. And I just don't want to do that for the Titans because I don't think that Julio Jones makes them a Super Bowl contender today.
That's where we disagree, Jared, because if you take that premise that Tennessee is not a Super Bowl contender today, Julio Jones won't get them there, right? I think that they are just a couple of pieces away from being a Super Bowl contender, and I think Julio Jones would be the first on the list of those pieces. Again, this assumes that defensive back, first-round draft choice, Caleb Farley, corner, is able to stay healthy and play at a high level. Assuming that, I think Jones is the one player who is available to get who would elevate this team as a single player and make other guys around him better, other units around him better, because of the way he forces mismatches on the other side of the ball. He's the best player with the biggest impact that can take them to that promised land. And really, he's probably the only one that I've seen that's out there that's available that could do that. Gee, I see the Minnesota Vikings, and you make a good point about that. I see them as not in the top tier of NFC teams. I see them in the second tier. I see Tennessee in the bottom of the top tier of AFC teams. They're hanging around that top tier, but they just are a piece or two away. And I see teams building for the future all the time, right? And there's two ways to skin the cat. You know, one way is to continue to build for the future. Think the Pittsburgh Steelers. Then they hit it. They get hot. They're building for the future. But now they haven't been a contender for the Super Bowl for a long, long time, right? And because they keep building for the future. Well, that's very, very nice. I look at Seattle when, you know, they had their couple of Super Bowl runs, 2 Super Bowls in a row, won one, lost one. But then they're building for the future. Are they really a Super Bowl run team? I don't know. But I think this
Trevor,
one
I disagree
is
with you on
Julio
Seattle.
Jones.
Trevor, I disagree with you on Seattle. I think they're a going for it team. And they just aren't good enough to get up to that upper echelon. I mean, they traded 2 first-round picks for Jamal Adams last year. I think that is as going for it as it gets. I mean, Seattle signs free agents.
But they're not. Well, you're right about that. You're right about that. But what I'm talking about really there is the quarterback situation. You know, they pay the quarterback, Russell Wilson. Next thing you know, they got to let a whole lot of people go. Next thing you know, they're desperate to restock. But as far as the Titans are concerned, if they're able to get him, and that's a big if they're able to get him, all of a sudden the Titans have what they have never had, and that is an elite, deep threat on the opposite side of A.J. Brown. At least they haven't had, recently. Add that to an already dominant passing game and running game when you're tied or ahead, then I think that's the difference. Because when you look at the passing success of Ryan Tannehill in the passing game last year, with Corey Davis as the number 2, and again, he was pretty good in the regular season, disappeared a bit in playoff games. That's sort of his history. But he set Tannehill's pass for over 4,000 yards. He set single-season franchise passing records last year with Corey Davis at number 2. Imagine what he can do with Julio Jones. It's not Tom Brady. Obviously, Tannehill is not Tom Brady with the Patriots. But when he had Randy Moss, when Brady got Randy Moss in there that was an elite deep threat, that one guy, they set all kinds of records. I don't want to compare apples to apples. I just want to say the situation is quite similar in that this one piece would be magical for all the other pieces that it affects on both sides of the ball.
615-737-1025. That's our number. Trevor Matich is our guest, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Coming up next, Trev, we got a lot of SEC news to get to. Dan Mullen has signed a contract extension at Florida. Plus, is Vol baseball giving Vol football fans hope? Should it? We'll discuss with Trevor next. Stillman Company. We're delivered by TriStar Moving. It's ESPN 1025 The Game. Trevor Maddich is with us, ESPN college football analyst, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics. When experience matters. In 10 minutes, boy, I got criticized a lot on this Tannehill restructure. In 10 minutes, I'll explain why it's not as simple as everybody else makes it out to be. So, the Tennessee Volunteers baseball program, that's right, number 3 in the country. And Tony Vitello, their head coach, has been there a handful of years, got there in 2018. They were 29-27, 6th place. Then they got a little bit better, 14-21. Then last year kind of wiped that out. This year, 45-16, first in the SEC East, and now the number 3 national seed. This is his 4th season on the job. We know the SEC is a very competitive baseball conference. And so, Trevor Maddich, my question for you is, does the success of Vol baseball, a middling to underachieving program that gets a new coach and all of a sudden after 4 years is one of the top teams in the country, does that give Vol football fans hope that perhaps if Josh Heupel is given time or if the right guy is given time, that they can turn that program around just like Tony Vitello has turned around Tennessee baseball?
Yeah, I think so because, with baseball, pitching can overcome a lot of other problems. And in football, quarterback can overcome a lot of problems, although you are more reliant on the people around you, especially with protection. Nobody's blitzing a pitcher. But I think that is that's a great thing for Tennessee football fans to hang their hat on, because what have they been able to hang their hat on in recent years? I mean, not even the women's basketball team to the degree that they used to be able to. And so when it comes down to it, I think that you've got the football program in a position where they need to recruit at a high level, but they won't recruit at the highest level yet. They first have to show something that works. Recruits will look at the fact that several Tennessee Volunteer football players that were going to be starters for Tennessee have transferred out. 3 of them went to Oklahoma and will either start or be key contributors to Oklahoma, a team that we'll be talking about all year long as a potential not just playoff team, but potential national championship contender. And we'll talk about Wanye Morris and Eric Gray. And we'll talk about guys that would have been in Orange this year had they not said, nah, I'm out of here. I'm done with Knoxville. And that's all on one team. That's Oklahoma. And so what Tennessee needs to do now in football is put some evidence on the board. And the way they're going to have to do that is by identifying players that are diamonds in the rough that other coaches are missing, and then develop them into good into productive college football players, which means that Coach Heupel and his staff right now has to build this as a developmental program.
Trev, I know you're not a baseball analyst, but I guess the one thing that I struggle with, because I would agree. I mean, Tennessee baseball was a no factor here. They were a no factor there, and then all of a sudden Vitello gets hired kind of under the radar. No one's paying attention, and now all of a sudden national contenders. Vandy, for example, this is where I struggle with the idea that it's hope for Vol football fans. Vandy has an excellent baseball program. Every year, national championship contenders every single year. Great coach, highest paid coach in the country. They got great facilities. And yet, if I were to ask you the question, does Vandy's baseball success give us hope that Vandy football could turn it around? None of us would say yes. So that's the one place where I kind of say, well, maybe they're just completely different sports. I mean, the SEC at baseball will compete just as hard on that scale as they compete in football, but yet Vanderbilt seems to be able to keep up with the Joneses in baseball, and they have no desire to do so in football.
So I see that differently, Jared, and I think that Vandy's baseball team is the long-term example for both Tennessee football and Vanderbilt football. When Coach Tim Corbin, was a young coach at Presbyterian, he would go on recruiting trips without a budget and sleep in his car. So he's got the work ethic. He also would go on recruiting trips to places that other coaches wouldn't go, to look at players that were too far off the beaten path for other coaches to care to go visit. And he would find guys that he could develop. And he had a very clear, this is Corbin now, a very clear mission for what kind of guy he wanted to recruit. It wasn't just the most talented guy. He was looking for, physical attributes, arm speed, bat speed, regular speed, running speed, those kinds of things. But he also wanted a guy that would fit in. And he's called the Nick Saban of college baseball for a reason, And that's because the process reigns supreme, and the process is self-perpetuating. And so he got guys in that would be developed because they were coachable, guys with certain traits that he could build on. And then he turned those guys into better and better college baseball players until all of a sudden, instead of just recruiting basically out of big markets in the Northeast, now he recruits coast to coast, and people recruit to him, right? And then they have continued their developmental phase. I mean, they take guys and develop them as well as or better than any other coaching staff in any sport that I've ever seen. And so they teach these guys how to play. And it's not just that they teach them new ways to do things, they teach their confidence as well. You'll get pitchers at Vanderbilt that all of a sudden become better pitchers because they develop more confidence in using their off pitches when their fastball is more appropriate or more expected. Let's put it that way. So all of a sudden it's 3-0, 3-1, and 3-2, you're expecting a fastball, and they'll come with something else. And these are the kinds of things that are confidence more than capability. So they're able to develop those players. For Vanderbilt football, it's the same kind of thing. Now, first they have to develop for Vanderbilt football. Tennessee's already done this. But Vanderbilt football has to develop their facilities. The Vanderbilt baseball facilities are second to none, and they have a pro locker room next to their college baseball locker room so that the guys that are playing in the bigs or in minor league baseball professionally can come back and spend time there, and they interact with the players that are currently there. And that helps recruiting as well as development. So all these things are part of the process that Coach Corbin has put in. And really, ultimately, both Vandy and Tennessee football need to develop their programs as developmental programs the way Coach Corbin did early, but then turn that into a process that is self-perpetuating of doing the small details right and developing players while the recruiting naturally gets better.
Do you think that maybe there's too much pressure on that Vol football coaching position in order to keep whoever – right now it's Heupel, but to keep that person from being able to have the kind of success and really the true turnaround that Tony Vitello had in the baseball program or Corbin had in this baseball program? Because it wasn't like Corbin showed up and all of a sudden Vandy was number one in the country. I mean, it took time. It took work. Same with Vitello. We went over it after the first year. They weren't very good. They had success in the second year, but it was a small amount of success. I feel like every time that the Vol football program has a small amount of success, the fans then automatically start beating the drum and saying, all right, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, here we come. And I think it's hard to build a program with that kind of pressure.
It is, but that's really a problem for the administration. Because if they allow that kind of pressure from Tennessee Twitter and from Tennessee fans and boosters to get to the coaching staff, then they're going to end up with a new coaching staff in a few years. If the administration acts as the buffer, and think of Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the NFL. He gets paid, $30 or $40 million a year. Why? So that every controversial decision that is made by the NFL owners, he takes responsibility for, and he takes all the heat for. That's why he gets paid all that money.
Sure.
Well, really, that role of a buffer is what the Tennessee administration and actually athletic department up higher than the coach's office needs to do. I expect Tennessee football for the next couple of years, Jared, to be some exciting flashes, a whole lot of smoke, and an occasional wet blanket thrown over the whole thing. Right? That's what it's going to be, because they just don't have enough horses, especially in the trenches, especially with the transfers. I mean, Henry To'o, five-star linebacker, transfers to Alabama. He's going to be starting wearing crimson against Tennessee this year. I mean, and he's a Tennessee recruit. So these are the kinds of things that'll take time to overcome. I think the flash will be the offense, because they will attract young players that can run and throw and catch. But until they get the lines beefed up, that's where the smoke, meaning there's not enough heat for a flame, and where the wet blanket is going to be until they get those things built up. Can they do it? Yeah, but it'll be built on the strength of the excitement of those moments of flash that they can put onto recruiting tapes.
Trevor Maddich, ESPN college football analyst, as always, joining us in the program presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Trev, good to talk to you. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Jared.
Yep, Trevor Maddich joining us on the program. Well, how about that? Trevor thinks that Vol baseball or Vandy baseball maybe is a little bit of hope for Vol football fans. We'll dive into that. But coming up next, 615-737-1025. Twitter got mad at me this weekend. They got mad. I pointed out that perhaps restructuring Ryan Tannehill's contract is not the only domino that would have to fall in order for the Titans to acquire Julio Jones? And some people they got mad and just all next. Stillman Company were delivered by TriStar Moving. It's ESPN 102.5 The Game. Stillman Company is delivered by TriStar Moving. Caroline Fenton is now on my list.
What?
I did not stir the pot. Our Twitter handle.
Are people upset with you?
Our Twitter handle says Stillman Company. Jared Stillman explains why he stirred the pot. I did not stir the pot.
Well, are people upset with you?
Yes, Twitter people are mad at me.
Then I would call that a little bit of pot stirring.
No, it is not. Pot stirring is when you just throw out a bomb take and just say, I think LeBron James stinks. That's stirring the pot. Like, that is stirring the pot. Skip Bayless does that every day. Telling the truth is not stirring the pot. So I did not even think, Twitter got mad at me on Sunday. They got mad. So I replied to a tweet. Jeff Schultz, a longtime Atlanta columnist, now with The Athletic, he sent out a tweet the other day in which he said that I guess he was asked about restructuring Tannehill or something like that. Somebody said to him that a Tannehill restructure alone would be enough for the Titans to be able to afford Julio Jones. To which I said, quote, the Tannehill restructure being the only move required simply isn't true. And those who say that do not understand contracts in the NFL. And boy, did people get mad at me. Now, I don't know what's so controversial about that. I don't. But even guys that are, what really happens is people that want to be analysts who aren't, they then start attacking you, being like, well, we've done our research, and our research says that you can, well, you don't know more about, what do you know about NFL contracts? I don't know. When you're the son of somebody who say your dad worked in the auto parts business for 50 years, there's a chance that maybe you've picked up on a thing or two. So we've done this show before Caroline got here for 5 years where we did work with somebody who managed NFL contracts every day, and all of these things were discussed. A simple Tannehill restructure would not allow you to get Julio Jones. I guess technically you could get Julio Jones under contract for this year and next year by fully restructuring Ryan Tannehill, and then that is literally the only move you can make. You have no room at all to do anything outside of that. So it's like people are saying, a simple Tannehill restructure, just go get Julio Jones. So we did that today. By the way, before free agency started this year, I worked on reworking every major contract the Titans had. I suggested the idea of threatening Ben Jones to cut him if he wouldn't take a pay cut. And everybody said, no, we can't do that. Here's why a simple Tannehill restructure would not work. When I restructured Tannehill's contract prior to free agency and tried to work around the numbers, I came up with $6 to $8 million that I could save on this year's cap where I would feel comfortable that I wouldn't be blowing up the future. In order to redo Ryan Tannehill's contract for Julio Jones, you would have to convert his entire 2021 salary to a signing bonus. So he'd get a check today for about $24 million. And then that would spread out $8.16 million over the next 3 years. And everybody sees that and they say, okay, do it. Restructure Tannehill. It's $8 million on this year's cap instead of $24 million on this cap. And then Tannehill comes in at a $13.16 million hit, and that gives you roughly $15 million in salary cap space. Yes. You know what happens if you do that?
What happens?
Ryan Tannehill costs you $42 million on your cap next year. So I'm bringing in Julio Jones, who's going to take up all of my cap space that I just got by restructuring Ryan Tannehill's contract. I don't have a number one tight end. I don't have a number one kicker. I have no depth at outside linebacker, and I don't have a slot receiver. But I just spent all my money on Julio Jones. Now Ryan Tannehill comes with a $42 million cap hit. I don't like the fact that he comes with a $36 million cap hit or whatever it is next year. But now we're talking about a $42 million cap hit for Ryan Tannehill in 2022. And if he's still on the team in 2023, he comes with a $40.1 million dead cap charge. So a $42 million cap hit for next year. The 2022 cap ceiling is $208 million. That means that it cannot be more than 208. It could be 205. It could be 202. It could legitimately be $200 million. But as of right now, the ceiling is 208. Best case scenario. If the Titans restructure Tannehill and take on a $42 million cap charge next year and are committed to Julio Jones' $11.3 million guaranteed base salary for next year, that would put them roughly at $205 million. Again, we don't know what the cap is for 2022. We know it can't be more than 208. So now you're putting them at $205 million next year. Oh, and by the way, the Titans are going to lose Rashaan Evans, Jayon Brown, Josh Reynolds, Ben Jones, Harold Landry, Anthony Ferguson, Jeff Swaim, and they still don't have a starting tight end, and they still don't have a kicker.
But they have Julio Jones.
And they're going to have to sign their rookie class for 2022. And again, they'll have about $3 million to do it, which means somebody else has to get cut, which is why I told you last week, you want Julio Jones, you got to redo Tannehill, you got to redo Lewan, you got to cut Roger Saffold. And everybody's like, no, they don't need to cut Roger Saffold. They don't need to. Yes, they do. Because if you don't, you're going to put yourself in a situation where literally the only two players you can afford are Tannehill and Julio Jones. Caroline, you went through this exercise with me today. I am not making up numbers. I did not fudge it. I did not go into this with the approach of, let me figure out how difficult I could make it to be in order to restructure Tannehill to fit Julio Jones on it. I ran the numbers. And this goes back to the point about understanding contracts in the NFL. We live in a sports world where baseball has no salary cap. Basketball might as well not have a salary cap. Hockey has a hard cap that if you spend it, you pay. And football's got kind of a little weird salary cap. Like, is the cap real? It doesn't feel that way when Kansas City every year is right up against it and then signs their best players to massive contract extensions and then goes out and trades for a starting right tackle. It doesn't feel like there's a cap. But the truth is that there is a legitimate cap in the NFL. And at some point, you can put things off, but at some point, you will have to pay. Just ask the New Orleans Saints what it's like to have to pay. Because right now, they have to pay, and they've got Jameis Winston at quarterback. Ask the Philadelphia Eagles what it's like to have to pay. They've traded away Carson Wentz. They have no answer at quarterback. They don't know what their future is. Maybe it's Jalen, maybe it's not. They have to pay. The Atlanta Falcons didn't win a Super Bowl. They keep kicking the contract of Matt Ryan down the can. They can't get rid of Matt Ryan. It'd be a $40 million cap charge just to get rid of him. And they're not very good, and now they have to get rid of Julio Jones. Did anybody ever think about, if Julio's so good, why doesn't Atlanta want to keep him? Because they can't afford it. Because they kicked this down the road as long as they could. So you can tell me, hey, you simply restructure Tannehill, boom, there you go. You've restructured him, Julio's in, let's go, baby. And it's not that simple. Let me ask you, if you're committed to $205 million in next year's cap, and it is lower than the ceiling, who plays middle linebacker next year? Because it's not Rashaan Evans and it's not Jayon Brown. Who's the starting center next year? Ben Jones leaves as a free agent. He's in his 30s. You going to go sign somebody? Not when you don't have any money. Who's opposite Bud Dupree next year? Because Harold Landry's a free agent. Who plays tight end? You don't have a starting tight end right now, but you don't have Anthony Ferkser or Jeff Swaim under contract. So somebody else has to go. And that's why it's not as simple. We live in a society now where everybody listens and watches, for the most part, what they want to hear. That's why the ratings on Fox News and CNN are just oh so high. Because they'd rather have their favorite political pundit tell them about the economy instead of, I don't know, an economist. I laugh because I hear when people say things like, well, economists are boring. I don't want to hear what an economist has to say. You know that's their job, right? Sean Hannity, Anderson Cooper, they're not economists. They're entertainers. That's their job. So they affirm your beliefs. So people that tell you on Twitter all the Titans have to do is restructure Tannehill and boom, they're right in there. They're not telling you the truth. It's not feasible. It's not feasible for the Titans to overcommit to next year's cap, have to then cut guys to get under it or be right at it, and then have to fill the spots of Rashaan Evans, Jayon Brown, Josh Reynolds, Ben Jones, Harold Landry, Anthony Ferkser, and Jeff Swaim. It's like last week when I said there was no way for them to keep Roger Saffold if they wanted Julio Jones. And Joe Rexrode started coming to me with the idea of including Janoris Jenkins in a trade. The only guy the Titans have at the cornerback position who has, played corner in the NFL. That doesn't make any sense. So again, let's just roll with common sense here. A simple Tannehill restructure is not good enough. And you really, at that point, are bowing down to Tannehill. Has anybody ever taken into account of What if 165 yards in the playoffs is what Tannehill is? I'm not saying that I am convinced that Ryan Tannehill is nothing more than a guy who can hand the ball off to Derrick Henry on a good team. I've never said that. But didn't the last playoff game against the Ravens open our eyes to the possibility that maybe Tannehill is what's holding the team back? Maybe. Again, I don't believe it. But I am open to the possibility, which means I want to see how next year goes before I literally put my hands down in shackles and say, okay, Ryan, name your price, put me over the barrel. Because that's where they would be. As I've outlined earlier today, that's where Minnesota was when they thought all they were was a Kirk Cousins away from winning the Super Bowl. Since then, they've gotten progressively worse. They've traded away great players like Stephon Diggs. Their defense has fallen apart. They've fired coordinators, and yet there's Kirk Cousins at quarterback for Minnesota. Good luck to the Vikings. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. 615-737-1025. We'll get your reaction. Plus, we'll get some headlines with Caroline. We'll do that coming up here on Stillman Company. Caroline, do you back my logic there?
I'm with you because I don't believe in completely blowing up the future of a team in hopes of a Super Bowl or in hopes of making a little bit further in the playoffs. Sure. Because if I thought that Julio Jones was the one key to a Titan Super Bowl, I would say, hey, you know what? Do it. Go for it. I don't think that's the case. And I think there are a lot more glaring holes. And also, a lot of fans who have said that Ryan Tannehill has an expiration date and it's coming up soon are the same ones who are saying restructure his contract. If I have a quarterback who probably has, let's be honest, 2 to 3 years left, probably, I might be wrong, I'm not going to pay him $40 million in his last 2 to 3 years.
$42 million against your cap next year if you fully restructure Tannehill. How do you feel about it? 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. By the way, I had somebody on Twitter that I have never met. I think he runs the Broadway Sports Entertainment, whatever it's called, the website, which John Glennon's a part of, which I hope it works. I don't know, maybe it will, maybe it won't. I don't know. But the guy who runs it said,
wish them the best.
Jared's, yes. And I mean that seriously. Like, we need more coverage of all of our teams here. But he said, not that Jared Stillman will address this, but, well, guess what? I just did. So for everybody out there that's going to tell me, who I've never met, who's going to tell me what I'm going to do, I just addressed it. It is not feasible for the Titans to just restructure Tannehill's contract and go from there. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. You know what is feasible? Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. I love those guys. They take great care of my home, and they can do it for you. I was nervous at first, too, when I called that Happy Face truck, and they showed up, and boy, was I put to ease with the great service that Hiller has given me for the last 3 years. Summer weather is here. And this is the time of the year when your AC systems are working overtime. If your unit is nearing the end of its lifespan or you're starting to have trouble keeping your house cool enough, now is the time to replace it. My friends at Hiller are offering special financing on HVAC systems this summer, so get a new system installed and pay 0 interest for 60 months. That's 0 interest for 60 months. Don't wait until you're uncomfortable. Go ahead and ensure you're ready for peak temperatures. Visit happyhiller.com for all of the details. As always, happy you will be, or the service is free. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, proud supporters of the Preds and the Vols. Hiller, call the Happy Face truck today.
Wherever Julio goes, your offense is instantly better. That was very interesting what Graz was talking about with the Rams because, I mean, Stafford knows what it's like to throw to big receivers like that when he had Calvin Johnson. I don't know what the Rams can give up in terms of draft picks for Julio Jones for a team that I don't think has any draft picks, but they've been trading away first-round picks like they're going out of style. I don't think they have another one till 2024, but I tell you, him in that offense, it would be a good, not a good fit, but man, Stafford and Julio Jones, I like that. The New England perspective is unique to me because, I mean, you have Cam Newton, and Cam Newton's basically your quarterback, and he's almost your best running back in terms of the threat that he poses. Do you really put it on Cam Newton to spread it out to Smith, to Henry, to Aguilar, to Jones? I don't know if he's that type of quarterback anymore. So is this a move to where you lean for the future with Mac Jones? I mean, do they see Mac Jones playing sooner than later? That's the thing that makes me think about if Julio's a possibility here. So two interesting perspectives from the Rams to the Patriots. But I believe there's a team that can come out of nowhere and just say, the best you got's a 3. Well, I got a 2 for you. So anything can happen with Julio.
Teddy Bruschi this morning, boy, he doesn't sound super pumped about the idea of his team, the Patriots, adding Julio Jones. And it should be noted, friend of Vrabel, Teddy Bruschi.
True.
Now, I'm not saying, I don't know if Mike and Teddy talk about that kind of stuff on a daily basis. I don't know. But notice that Teddy didn't throw the Titans in there. Graziano this morning threw the Titans in the mix on the Julio front. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And again, somebody texted into the text line, and our text line driven by WilsonCountyHunting.com and said, well, Jared, Spotrac said that the Titans would clear $15 million if they restructured Tannehill. Do you know more than they do? Well, first of all, let me say this. When free agency opened, Spotrac, when the Titans released Dennis Kelly, said that the Titans saved $3 million against the cap. I was told by a source who would know that it was really $5 million. So when you just take reports of what's out there, it's not like Spotrac is literally analyzing every contract that has come through. Now, you get some of these good reporters like TD, they can get their hands on actual contracts. But that website doesn't do it. I'm not knocking Spotrac. I like using Spotrac. But the numbers aren't totally completely accurate all the time. The Dennis Kelly thing is an example of this. But anybody who tells you that simply restructuring Tannehill is good enough to get Julio Jones is ignoring what it does to your entire roster next season. And that's the thing that I try to really pin down is that it legitimately keeps you, unless you want to cut other people, it keeps you from making additions to this year's team and to next year's team. And that's where I say it's more complicated than just restructuring Tannehill. And I think people get angry, but I don't know why.
I think it's because people want Julio Jones.
So they want to hear
that it's possible. And I totally understand coming from a fan's perspective, you want to put your team in the best possible place to win. And Julio Jones, in theory, could do that. So they don't want to hear that, no, it's not possible. Because it's fun to think about Julio Jones coming to your team.
Well, it's kind of like last year with the Clowney stuff. And we already played the clip earlier today. But Floyd told you guys that last season, if you sign Clowney, it's going to cost you either Jayon Brown or Jonnu Smith. And he said it. And it ended up costing the Titans Jonnu Smith. And it's easy to say now. Then it was easy to say, I got the money, give it to Clowney. Let's go. Give him the money. But it cost you Jonnu Smith. How does it feel now to not have Jonnu Smith? Those are the ramifications. Those are the things that get discussed when this happens. Like, that's what happens to you when that happens, is you lose that guy, and those are the 2 steps ahead. Nobody was talking about Jonnu Smith or Jayon Brown last year. Nobody was talking about it, except for Floyd, and he's been there and done that. And that's the point I make about, okay, fine. You redo Tannehill's deal, and all of a sudden now, Rashawn Evans, Jayon Brown, Josh Reynolds, Ben Jones, Harold Landry, Anthony Ferguson, Jeff Swaim all hit free agency. I already don't have a tight end. I already don't have a kicker, and I have no depth at outside linebacker. What are you going to do about it? There's nothing you can do if you just move it like that. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Ellie is going to kick us off this hour. Phone line's driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Go ahead, Ellie.
Instead of going for Julio, why wouldn't we just try to go for Aaron Rodgers? Offer them Ryan Tannehill, Rashad Evans, a first-round pick, and maybe a third-round pick. I think that would make more of a difference for us going to a Super Bowl than getting Julio Jones, who might play 10 games, and lucky if the playoffs. Thank you.
So I appreciate your call, Ellie. I think the Titans would be afraid to get into a Tannehill bidding war, a Rodgers bidding war, because the likelihood of them trading Aaron Rodgers for Ryan Tannehill isn't overly high, but the damage that it would do to Ryan Tannehill and the relationship you have with Ryan Tannehill, if it got out that you were trying to acquire Aaron Rodgers for him, I think would not be worth it. And the Titans seem to care about those things. The Predators apparently, bench Dante Fabro all they want. And then, Dante's a big part of our team. Is he? Is he? Now, you can tell me that Dante's a big part of the team. You think Dante believes that? You think so? The Titans, I think, care about that. So I don't think they'd want to get involved in that. Let me say this, though, on the Rodgers front. I think Green Bay's holding strong. I think Green Bay has put their flag in the ground and says, you want to do it, Aaron? Fine. And I don't see them cratering and kowtowing to Aaron. And I would be the first person in Aaron's life that doesn't just kowtow to Aaron or Aaron have more power than they do in this case. Because I think the Packers are fine. Write us a $40 million check. And I think Green Bay has held their – I think this is what Green Bay's doing. I think they are sold on it. I think Green Bay's like, fine, Aaron, get out.
And I think that's also Aaron kind of acting a little bit childish, not showing up for OTAs, going on a trip to Hawaii and posting photos on Instagram, on Twitter, on social media, and just being like, look how much I don't care about this team. And
sure.
But the Packers and Brian Gutekunst, the general manager, have said, we want Aaron Rodgers to be our quarterback next year. But I wonder if the Green Bay Packers get to a certain point with him when they're like, we don't want to deal with it anymore.
I don't think they're giving up. I don't think they're giving up. I don't think they're giving in. Aaron doesn't show up. Jordan Love, get out there. 52, hike. Give us $40 million back. Jordan Love, you're in. Makes sense to me. Kevin is up next on the Tannehill contract. Thank you for calling. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So two things. One is given what happened with Jadeveon Clowney last year, do you think J-Rob is a little hesitant to go for this splash acquisition, just given the salary cap ramifications, given what we got to give up? And then secondly, after that, do you think that I'm picking up my son. I just forgot.
Thanks, Kevin. My thoughts on the idea that Clowney is affecting the Julio thing. No. I mean, I get this all the time, right? Which is like, well, we drafted a quarterback last year, 5 years ago, and it didn't work out, so let's not draft a quarterback now.
It's the same idea of the Titans not wanting to draft Azeez Ojulari because Isaiah Wilson didn't work out and they both went to Georgia. I see the connection there. It just doesn't make any sense.
Right. And I remember when the Titans drafted Mariota, and it was like, it didn't work out with Locker, it didn't work out with Vince Young, so it's not going to work out. It's a totally different scenario. I mean, Clowney was an injured guy, an outside linebacker who they thought could come in and make a difference, and obviously he didn't. Then they went out and they paid Bud Dupree, an injured outside linebacker, to come in and make a difference. No, I do not think John Robinson is against acquiring Julio because of what happened with Clowney last year. I do think the realization that signing Clowney cost them Jonnu Smith, I think is probably making them, it's like they had that card to play last year, which was, we can try to push it in the center and go for it. It's going to cost us Jonnu Smith. They played that card last year. They probably can't play that card again, or else they're going to lose everybody. I mean, at this point, they're going to lose Rashawn Evans, Jayon Brown, Josh Reynolds, Ben Jones, Harold Landry, Anthony Ferks, or Jeff Swain. That is if they restructure Tannehill to get a Julio deal. They may also have to lose Saffold or lose Lawan or lose something like that, and I think they would prefer to have just a little bit more cushion there in the tank. 615-737-1025. We'll hit some of your texts on this, plus we'll get a news update from Caroline. That is coming up next. Stillman Company, we are right here on ESPN 1025 The Game. It has been a lively post-Memorial Day show. You know, normally Memorial Day, everyone's out summer, but it's been live today in June. ESPN 94.9 is the home of Nashville Sounds baseball tonight. The Sounds are in Charlotte, taking on the Charlotte Knights. Pregame with Jeff Him at 5:50. First pitch at 6:04. Sounds baseball on ESPN 94.9, presented by Farm Bureau Health Plans and 312 Pizza Company. Stillman and Company, it's ESPN 1025 The Game.
Mike Tannenbaum, you've always got answers for me here. If you're the general manager in Atlanta right now, tell me how this is playing out. What are you doing on the phones as you try to figure out how and when you're going to trade Julio Jones?
I'm taking a list of those teams that Dan just gave us, and I'm saying, I need your best offer by the end of the day today. And don't complain tomorrow that you would have done more when I trade him to Team X, because this is going to happen, and it's going to happen fast. And that's the only way I really can create a sense of urgency, and here's why. It's been so public that you simply can't tell another team, if we don't get the offer we like, he's going to come back and be a Falcon. That's off the table. So the best way to create a sense of urgency is, I need your final and best offer today.
There you go. That was Mike Tannenbaum saying he needs final offers today on Julio. I don't think the Titans are going to be one of them. Let's go to your phone, 615-737-1025, text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Caroline Fenton, what do we have?
Sam texted in and said Bills restructured Stephon Diggs to free up roughly $8 million, many thinking for Ertz or for Julio. If Ertz is off the table and you don't like Julio to the Titans, what would be your next top two priorities?
I just need a starting tight end.
A tight end.
I don't need a great tight end. I think this is the thing people don't understand. Like, they think of Ertz and they think, yes, that is a great tight end, and maybe he is. I just need a starting tight end. It's almost like a pitcher in baseball, right? Like, you have aces. Guy like Garrett Cole, you give him the ball and you expect him to go out and give you 6 or 7 innings, strike out 10, and turn it over to the bullpen with a lead if you get any hitting at all. I just need a guy that can go out there and give me 6 innings, 3-4 runs, and just give me a chance. That's all I need at tight end. The explosive superstar play on offense, I already have. I've got Derrick Henry. I've got A.J. Brown. I'm paying Ryan Tannehill $29.5 million. I've got a left tackle who's missed half of the season over the last 2 years, who I'm paying a bunch of money to. I got star players. I'm giving Josh Reynolds a chance. Like, that's how I feel about Josh Reynolds. I don't need a superstar at that position. But Corey Davis never was a superstar. He was just drafted really high. That's all I need, just a guy. So like Hayden Hurst in Atlanta, I think could be that guy that comes in and is a starting tight end. Is he a great tight end? No. But I just need a starting tight end. Anthony Ferkser is not a starting tight end. People will tell me, well, Frank Wycheck was more of a catch-first tight end, and the Titans brought him in, and he was a waiver claim. And Frank Wycheck was the number 1 tight end on a team that ran the ball almost every snap with Eddie George. They didn't take Frank out of the game to hand it to Eddie. They take Anthony Ferkser out in order to give it to Derrick Henry. That's why I don't think that makes any, you can't equate that whatsoever. So I think that just a starting tight end, a guy who can block and who can catch, doesn't have to be great. Just give me a little something. Just be able to start in the NFL. That's all I ask. Time now for headlines with Caroline.
We're spanning the sports world. It's Headlines with Caroline on Stillman Company, right here on Nashville's best sports talk, ESPN 102.5 The Game and the Game Nashville app.
Kind of a scary story coming out of Atlanta from this weekend. Marcell Ozuna was arrested on Saturday night after police officers were dispatched to a different house, but witnessed him attacking his wife. Reports say that he grabbed her by the neck and threw her against the wall, hit her with the cast on his hand. He has 2 broken fingers, which has left him on IR recently. So he posted a $20,000 bail, but now the question is, how will the MLB respond? And the Braves have issued a statement saying they fully support the MLB's domestic violence policy. The domestic violence policy states and stresses to the fullest that our society cannot and will not tolerate domestic violence in any form. Direct quote from the MLB rulebook. They will not. The Braves have already said they will not comment on the subject or make any drastic moves. They're not going to trade. They're not going to cut him until the MLB completes their investigation. And Rob Manfred has the right to discipline a player even if he has not been charged or convicted in a criminal matter. And if Rob Manfred has decided to suspend Marcell Ozuna, it will be unpaid. So, interesting story to watch there in Atlanta.
I'm guessing Ozuna is going to get the rest of this season, maybe in the next season. I think he signed a 4-year deal before the start of the season.
He did not too long ago.
Ken Rosenthal had a great article on it on The Athletic where it basically sums up for the fact that, look, the Braves are kind of stuck with this regardless of whether or not he plays for them again. I have a hard time. I mean, like, I think the Braves are in trouble without him, and I'm a huge Braves fan, and I want the Braves to be good. I can't have those kind of guys on my team. And I have said this time and time again. This is kind of where I draw the line. You know, I would never want Tyreek Hill on my football team, but I have been at Arrowhead Stadium when 70,000 Chief fans are cheering him on. I can't root for that. I can't. You take a guy like Jeffrey Simmons and an incident he had, you can explain that to me, and I can be willing to give a second chance, and I can be. Marcell Ozuna had an incident last year where he was the victim in a domestic incident. The witness information from the police officers is very damning. I just think either you really are about it or you really aren't. And I think this comes to whether it's domestic violence, whether it's race relations, things of that magnitude. Either you're really about it or you're really not. And if you as a fan, like I am of the Braves, were to say, hey, the league suspended him for a year, and now he's back, and he says he's going to do better, so put him out there for the Atlanta Braves again. I don't have a hard time seeing the Braves put him out there. And the Braves saying, well, the league suspended him, and we can't cut him, so here we are. Okay. I don't have a hard time seeing the Braves do that. Like, I think that that's a legitimate possibility. I, as a fan, have a hard time watching my team allow that. And I'm not saying that the Braves are going to do that because we don't know. But I personally have a hard time with that.
And I totally understand that. It's kind of like you have to choose between understanding that this is a business and the Braves are paying him a lot of money. And if Rob Manfred and the league say that he can play, then it would be hard to not let him play. But it also is hard to, you know, be a mother or a father and buying a jersey for your son or daughter with Marcell Ozuna's name on the back, knowing what he has done. So kind of a tough position there. So we'll be following that along closely. Also, a little bit of lighter news. Jeff Borzello, who writes for ESPN on college basketball, released his way too early peek, see what it was in there. Tennessee, he ranked in his way too early rankings, number 18 in the nation. Mentioned that Rick Barnes will be losing a big chunk of his starting roster in Keon Johnson, Jaden Springer, and East Pons in the NBA draft, but has also filled those holes tenfold. So he added guys like Kennedy Chandler, number 1 point guard in the nation. He signed a transfer from Auburn. And John Fulkerson, Victor Bailey, and Josiah Jordan James will all be veterans on the court next year. And I hear this. Like, I get it. I know. I get it that Rick Barnes has a really stellar recruiting class, one of the best in the nation coming in. Tennessee looked like a top 4 team in the nation in the very beginning of the season and also had a really great recruiting class. It had a ton of talent on that team, and they got out in the first round of the NCAA tournament. So until I see it, I have a hard time believing this.
I have somebody that I respect very, very much tell me a month ago that said, you know, Rick Barnes has never had the kind of recruiting that he has now. And I said, he had Kevin Durant. And the guy said, well, but he didn't have that. Go back to Texas. I mean, here's the thing. Maybe Rick Barnes can change the narrative of it. But the Joe Rexrode basketball bennies out there do not appreciate when somebody mentions the fact that, recruiting good players is not something that we find uncommon from Rick Barnes. Winning with those recruited players seems to be the missing link for Rick Barnes' tenure at Texas and now his tenure at Tennessee. So I'm not a recruiting rankings guy. I'm just telling you. You guys can keep saying it. Well, we'll see. But if he couldn't do it with Durant, is he really going to do it with these guys?
Well, I mean, we don't know what these guys are going to be. It's easy to say that about Kevin Durant now, knowing what he is and what he has become in the NBA.
Although we knew what Durant was then, too.
Yes, fair. I mean, number 1 point guard in the nation. I'm sorry. If you cannot win with that, it's time for you to go. I experienced it in my time at LSU. Ben Simmons, the number 1 pick in the NBA draft, the number 1 recruit, and the LSU didn't even make the tournament.
Single worst coach in the history of college basketball.
Yes,
I mean,
but if you cannot do something with really talented players, basketball is the kind of sport that if you have one superstar, you can win.
Sure.
So if you have a superstar, and in this case, multiple superstars, you got to be able to win.
Here's the other problem with this. Those guys don't stay around long.
That's true. You have a year, maybe two with these
Keon
kinds
Johnson
of guys.
is a perfect example of this. Is Keon Johnson ready for the NBA? No. But he's going to the NBA. So even the idea of, if Keon had stayed, then he would have been he wasn't going to stay, and he's not staying. And these guys, if they're that good of recruits, they're not staying either. Those are headlines with Caroline. Big Friday night from Caroline Fenton, thanks in large part to the Oakland A's.
They really saved me there.
She got a week and doesn't necessarily have to savage a beer at a game. We start week number 4, the final week of the month in Caroline's. Next, Stillman Company. It's ESPN 102.5 The Game. I do need to tell the fine folks out there quickly. I do need to tell them about the very, very important thing that I must tell them about.
It is very important.
615 Day. 102.5 The Game and the Nashville Predators will host 615 Day, a celebration at Ford Ice Center on June 15th, and will be benefiting the Boys and Girls Clubs of Middle Tennessee. This all-day event will feature family fun for the whole family while paying tribute to Nashville's annual 615 Day, an occasion that pairs Music City's area code with the date of June 15th. For more details, visit thegamenashville.com. Stillman Company were delivered by TriStar Moving. It's ESPN 102.5 The Game. Stillman Company, delivered by TriStar Moving. Victory was so close last week, and I could so taste it. But Caroline Fenton wins her first week of gambling in the history of her tenure with us by a final score. I was so proud of you.
Thank you so much.
A final score of 15-13 to my 14-14.
Woohoo!
I mean, even if you had tied, you would have lost. Because if we had tied, then I would have 2 weeks. We'd have a week of push. Then we'd have the final week of the month.
But I didn't
and
tie.
You'd have to savage a beer.
I didn't tie.
Now Caroline tries to tie for the month. So we start with Caroline's.
Get in on the action. Put the money on the mahogany. What's on tap on the sports books? It's time to break it all down with Caroline's. Here on Stillman Company.
On ESPN.
102.5 The Game and the Game Nashville app.
All right, shoot me straight, Caroline.
All right, so first, we've got Tampa Bay Lightning, Carolina Hurricanes, which may be of interest for Predators fans. Maybe not. We just want to just chase away that memory altogether. However, I'm going to take the Lightning money line minus 104. Nikita Kucherov has had 2 points and 3 power play goals in the playoffs. Vasilevsky has a .936 save percentage average in the playoffs. Is the Vezina front runner. He's minus 150 right now for the Vezina, along with Marc-Andre Fleury, and who else is in there?
I saw this today.
And Philip Grubauer.
Yeah,
whatever. Vasilevsky is currently the front runner for the Vezina, which essentially means nothing for tonight, but also Nino Niederreiter will be out for this entire series with an upper body issue. Tampa Bay won game 1, 2-1, and Vasilevsky kind of essentially stole it. Tampa Bay didn't look their best in game 1. I think Carolina really kind of ran that first period very much so. Tampa Bay kind of looked gassed a little bit, but I don't think that they're going to – I think that Tampa Bay is just very much so the better team. They have Andre Vasilevsky, the Carolina Hurricanes.
Who's my plus 1.5 in this game?
The Hurricanes, I believe.
I'm going to go Hurricanes plus 1.5, and I don't feel good about it. I think Tampa's going to smoke Carolina because I just don't think Carolina's on that level. I think that
Tampa Bay is plus 1.5.
Tampa Bay plus
minus
1.5.
300.
Sold. Tampa Bay plus 1.5 tonight.
All right.
I mean, I think it's going to be a close game. I don't think the Hurricanes are on the Lightning's level. Whoever's giving me plus 1.5 is who I was going to take. I don't think the Hurricanes are on the Lightning's level. I think this will go to 6 games maybe, but I think it's going to be a real rear-end spanking. I think the goalie differential is going to be the difference between these two teams. Nedeljkovic, I don't think is very good. Vasilevsky's going to win the Vezina. So
I don't think he's not good. I just don't think he's a Vezina contender.
I think, what was it? He was put on waivers at the beginning of the season and nobody claimed him. I think that's what he is. He is an average goalie. He is a Milwaukee goalie with a great team in front of him. I'm going to go Tampa Bay plus 1.5.
Cool.
What's next?
I've also got Portland Trailblazers and Denver Nuggets. I'm going to take the Nugs minus 2, minus 110.
Why do you have to pick the most boring basketball game? Who cares about these two teams?
Okay, well, Lakers Suns. I didn't feel confident picking that game. That game's also tonight. And then what other game is tonight? I don't know, but this just felt good. This felt right. Oh, it's Celtics. Celtics are playing tonight.
The Celtics and the Nets.
Celtics and the Nets.
Okay,
and I picked the Nets and the Celtics won, so I just did.
So we got the Trailblazers and the Nuggets. Who are you picking?
I'm going to take the Nugs minus 2, minus 110. Blazers are just 1-5 in games 5 on the road this postseason, while the Nuggets are 4-1 at home for game 5. Game 4 in this series. I mean, it got to a point where it got so bad that the Denver Nuggets just took all of their starters out. They never held a lead in the game. So Denver starters are coming in a little bit more well-rested than Portland is. And minus 2, I like that.
I'm going to go Portland on the money line. I don't know much about them. But
plus 108.
They have Damian Lillard. So I'm going to take them on the money line. I mean, these are the kind of series I hate, where they are so insignificant in the grand scheme of the NBA playoffs.
I mean, the Denver Nuggets could win the NBA Finals.
Whoever wins this series, whoever wins this series is getting blasted in the next round.
Yes.
Okay. I hate series like that. What's our last?
We also have Braves, Nationals. I'm going to rock with your team tonight. I'm rocking with the Braves money line. The Nationals have Steven Strasburg out on the mound. He's got a 4.48 ERA. He's 2-2 with 4 starts. Just got off of the injury reserve. The Braves have Max Fried, who has just been lighting it up recently. I love
ace.
I love a southpaw. He's got a 1.8 ERA, 2-1 in his 4 starts, and he's pitched at least 6 innings in every game that he has started. So feeling good about the Braves bullpen there. We'll probably give the Braves a solid 5 to 6 innings if history repeats itself. And this is only Strasburg's 3rd start since returning from injury, and the Braves offense is just really, really good.
Do you have the run line there?
I'll pull it up.
Because if it's Washington plus something, give me the Nats. I think I'm going to go with
Washington plus 1.5, minus 170.
Okay, I'm going to go Nationals plus 1.5 here. I don't trust the Braves. And I think Strasburg is still pretty good, even though he's
still pretty
old
good
and injured and kind of an old peepop. So I'm going to go the Nats on this. Boy, the Braves, man, they just can't play with any consistency. And they won yesterday, and Washington sucks. But the Braves, they cannot play with any consistency this season. And Memorial Day is the line of demarcation for me with a team where, when you got a team that starts off slowly, like it's early, it's a long season.
It's fine. It's March.
You get to Memorial Day and you're still struggling. I have issues. The Braves are at Memorial Day. I am not sold on this team. I am going to pick the Lakers money line over the Suns tonight. Again, the league needs LeBron. The league wants LeBron. The Lakers are the better team. Give me the Lakers in Game 5 on the money line over the Phoenix Suns.
I am going to take the Suns money line.
Okay.
Give me CP3. Give me Devin Booker.
You take Devin Booker in a game that doesn't matter. Let me know. Or in a game that matters. Let me know how that works out for you. That's it for us. We are out of here. Back tomorrow, too. ESPN Radio. They'll get you ready for all these NBA playoff games. That's next. Stillman Company. We're delivered by TriStar Moving. We'll see you tomorrow, too, on ESPN 102.5 The Game.